Christmas morning should have felt warm. It should have carried music, soft footsteps, a kiss on the forehead, maybe even the sweet sound of family sharing good news. But instead, as Imani padded down the stairs of the Whitman estate, the air carried something else entirely, something sharp, something she wasn't meant to hear. She was halfway down the polished staircase, fingertips trailing over the wooden railing, when Preston's voice cut through the quiet. It wasn't loud. It wasn't angry. It was worse, urgent, low, careful. I had to say it sooner or later. My assistant is expecting my child. The words weren't shouted. They were whispered. But they slammed into Imani with the force of a door shutting forever. She froze, one foot still hovering above the next step, a soft gasp trapped behind her lips, a tremor rolling through her fingers. For a moment, she didn't breathe. Her first thought wasn't even a thought, just a pulse, a shockwave that rushed through her body so fast she swayed where she stood. She gripped the railing harder, knuckles whitening as the world below her blurred slightly. Her husband, her partner in life for 8 years, standing somewhere in that grand living room, saying words she was never meant to hear. Bestie, can you feel how fast her heart is beating right now? That raw moment when the world you trusted suddenly shifts under your feet? Have you ever had a moment where someone you trusted said something that nearly took the air out of your lungs? A moment you didn't expect, didn't prepare for, didn't deserve? Imani stood there, chest rising and falling as if she couldn't pull enough oxygen into her lungs. A second voice drifted out, a voice that always carried judgment dressed in polished manners. Elizabeth, Preston's mother. Imani never expected her life to fracture before sunrise. Once she slipped back into the bedroom, the walls felt too close, the air too tight, like the room itself was reacting to what she had just heard. She shut the door gently, leaning against it as if she needed the wood to keep her upright. Her breath trembled. Her hands shook. Her mind raced. Preston hadn't just betrayed her. He had spoken about it calmly, like the morning news, and his mother celebrated it. Imani paced once, twice, 3 times, trying to collect pieces of herself that no longer wanted to stay together. The ceiling felt heavier. The carpet under her feet felt uneven. Even the faint echo of Christmas music from downstairs felt wrong, too cheerful, too bright, too disconnected from the devastation happening inside her chest. She moved toward the bed, sat down, and stared at the floor. Her pulse pounded in her ears. She closed her eyes tightly, and suddenly, memory hit. A flash of herself at 16, sitting in the wooden pew of her family's church in rural Georgia. Her mother squeezed her hand during the Christmas service, telling her, "Baby, I know we don't have much, but our love runs deep. Never forget you deserve someone who honors you." Imani exhaled shakily. Her mother's voice felt like comfort and truth, and the exact opposite of what the Whitmans ever gave her. She pressed a hand to her forehead. The memory faded, but the ache stayed. Downstairs, muffled voices continued. "Elizabeth, she was never suited for this family. She doesn't know how to be a wife in a home like ours. Preston, I'll talk to her after the holidays." After the holidays, as if she were an appointment, as if she didn't share his bed, as if she hadn't lost a child with him, as if she hadn't spent years trying to fit into a mold she never belonged in. Imani stood too quickly, the movement almost dizzying. She crossed to the dresser, wiping tears that rolled before she could stop them. She wasn't a woman who spiraled easily. She wasn't someone who lost control. But this cracked something old and deep inside her. She pressed her palms onto the dresser, steadying herself. Her reflection in the mirror looked unfamiliar. Eyes wide with shock, cheeks flushed, lips trembling. Not because she didn't love herself, but because she had tried so hard to believe her marriage was solid, even when her instincts hinted otherwise. Another memory surged. 2 years ago, a soft hospital room. Stark white sheets. Imani holding Preston's hand as doctors told them their baby was gone. She remembered crying into his chest, remembered him stroking her hair, remembered him whispering, "We'll try again, just not now." When things settle, things never settled. They drifted, they disconnected. She kept hoping. He kept leaving for work. A shudder rolled through her. She backed away from the dresser and sank onto the edge of the bed. Her hands slid automatically to her wedding ring. She twisted it once, twice, then stopped. What startled her wasn't the ring itself. It was the realization that she felt nothing from it anymore. 8 years of marriage, one ring, one vow, and all it took was one morning to reveal how breakable it all was. Her breath caught as Elizabeth's voice rose again from downstairs. "Preston, you did the right thing. That assistant is far more fitting." Imani was always too focused on climbing some career ladder. A wife should prioritize family first. Imani's jaw tightened hard enough to ache. She had to swallow a harsh, rising sting in her throat. The decades of expectation, coded insults, and fake smiles boiled up like a silent scream trapped behind her ribs. She whispered to herself, barely audible, "I didn't lose this marriage by being ambitious. I lost it because you never respected me." Her voice cracked at the end. She tried to breathe. Failed. Tried again. She knew she had to leave the room before she sobbed loudly enough for someone to hear. She stood and moved with purpose, not fast but firm, like each step was a vow. She opened the small drawer beside the bed and pulled out a pen. Her hand still shook, but she managed to write 3 simple words on a notepad. Had to leave. She tore the page carefully, placed it on her pillow, and set her wedding ring beside it. The ring glinted under the soft morning light, small, delicate, and now meaningless. She stared at it for a long moment, her throat tightening again with a quiet ache. Not sadness at losing Preston. Sadness at losing the version of herself who tried for so long. Downstairs, Elizabeth's laugh floated up again. It was too much. Imani reached for her coat. As she slipped it on, another flash of memory hit her, this one vivid enough to sting. She was 8 years old, sitting on the floor at her grandmother's house. The Christmas tree was small but full of life. Music played softly. Her grandmother held her face gently and told her, "Love should lift you, not shrink you." Imani blinked fast, stopping herself from crying again. She deserved better than whispers and dismissals. She deserved better than being treated like she didn't belong. She deserved better than a marriage where she was the only one fighting. She grabbed her purse and cracked open the bedroom door, making sure no one was near the staircase. The voices drifted from the living room, still celebrating. She moved silently along the hallway, each step steady, controlled. Every part of her wanted to run, but she refused to give them that image of her. She would not flee. She would exit with dignity. The back staircase was dim and quiet. She descended it quickly, letting the railing guide her as her breath shook again. At the bottom, she opened the side door to the yard. Cold winter air rushed in, biting but refreshing. She stepped out, letting the door close softly behind her. For one moment she stood there in the quiet, her breath visible in the morning chill. The sound of faint laughter drifted through the walls. She closed her eyes briefly. She wasn't part of that world anymore. She wasn't meant to be. She stepped away from the house, across the driveway, toward her car. She paused for half a second, looked back at the mansion, its tall windows, glowing with warmth she no longer believed in, and whispered to herself, "It's time." Then she slid into her car, shut the door quietly, and pressed her forehead to the steering wheel. Her hands trembled. Her breath shook. Her heart still throbbed painfully, but she was free, and she didn't even fully understand yet how strong she would become. She lifted her head, wiped her cheeks with her sleeve, and took one deep breath. She turned on the ignition. The engine hummed. The driveway stretched ahead. The road to Atlanta waited, cold but full of clarity. She put the car in gear, pressed the accelerator, and left the Whitman estate for the last time. The second climax wasn't just hearing betrayal. It was realizing she had the strength to walk away from it. "Oh, thank goodness, Preston," she murmured, sounding relieved. "Finally you'll have an heir. And with a woman who understands her role." Her role? Imani's free hand flew to her mouth. Her vision blurred instantly. What role was Elizabeth talking about? Wasn't she supposed to be Preston's wife? Hadn't she stood beside him through every challenge? Every board meeting? Every night he claimed he was too stressed or too tired. Every holiday where she tried her best to fit into a family that made her feel like she was applying for acceptance instead of already being part of them. Her throat tightened. Elizabeth's voice continued, light and casual, as if they were discussing brunch options instead of ripping apart Imani's world. "That girl you married, sweet, but never the right fit. Too opinionated, too focused on her job. A proper woman would have brought children into this home by now." A sting, a sharp one. Imani felt it deep, traveling from her chest to the pit of her stomach. Isn't it wild how people can smile at you while quietly hoping you'll fail? How they can sit at the same table, share the same meals, but secretly see you as temporary. Imani stood there, blinking fast, forcing herself not to make a sound. Her heart pounded so hard, it almost drowned out the voices below. Almost, because Preston spoke again. Claire understands me. She supports everything I do. And she's giving me a child. I'll finally be a father. Claire, his assistant, the woman he traveled with, the woman he spent late nights with, the woman whose name he mentioned casually, reassuringly, like she meant nothing. Imani's lips trembled. She stepped back slightly, the wood creaking faintly beneath her slipper. She hadn't expected this, never once suspected the life she built with Preston was cracking behind her back. She'd stayed up nights waiting for him, made his favorite meals, sat beside him at family dinners while Elizabeth complimented everyone but her. She carried the weight of the miscarriage alone while he buried himself in work. And this whole time, he was building something new with someone else? No, this couldn't be real. Her thoughts raced wildly, mind struggling to keep up with the avalanche crashing down on her. Was she not supportive? Was she too ambitious? Too educated? Too successful? Too black for the Whitman legacy Elizabeth worshipped? Imani felt a shiver run across her back, not from the cold, but from the raw sting of humiliation. Her fingers reached for the banister again, gripping it tighter. Inside the room, Elizabeth's delicate laugh rang out. "Well, we should start planning," she said eagerly. "The sooner this is handled, the better. Imani doesn't need to know until after the holidays. No need for unnecessary reactions." Unnecessary reactions. Imani swallowed hard. Her body felt heavy. Her stomach twisted. Her heartbeat thudded loudly in her ears, drowning out her own thoughts. She dared to lean slightly forward, just enough to see the faint glow of the fireplace illuminating Preston's tall frame. He looked relaxed, too relaxed for a man discussing betrayal. He wasn't nervous. He wasn't hesitant. He almost looked relieved. That detail struck her harder than any of the words spoken. He wasn't worried about losing her. He wasn't scared. He wasn't even conflicted. He had already decided she was no longer his future. A sudden trembling seized her hands. Her wedding ring felt heavier than ever. Her breath shortened. Her throat wavered between crying and screaming. She stepped back again, the stairs creaking softly. She couldn't be here. She couldn't hear another word. She couldn't allow herself to break in a home filled with people who would celebrate her breaking. She pressed her palm to her chest, willing herself to stay quiet, to hold the pieces of her heart together long enough to leave. Her chest rose sharply as a fresh wave of shock struck her. Bestie, if she heard this much already, what's going to happen when the rest of the truth reveals itself later? Because something far bigger is hiding beneath these whispers, something that will flip everything they think they know. Imani blinked rapidly, gathering the last ounce of strength she had left. She stepped backward carefully, silently, her heartbeat thudding like footsteps in her ears. Her hand brushed the railing, cold beneath her fingertips. Her balance wavered, her vision blurred, but she did not cry. Not yet. She wrapped her arms around herself and forced her breathing to steady as she reached the top of the staircase again. The lights from the Christmas tree flickered softly down the hall, but none of it felt beautiful. None of it felt like the holiday she loved. None of it felt like the life she thought she built. She took one slow step back, then another, until she reached the bedroom door, until she closed it behind her, until she locked it and leaned against it, finally letting out a quiet, broken exhale. Her entire world had shifted before sunrise. Her entire marriage had collapsed before breakfast. Her entire sense of belonging had cracked open before anyone downstairs realized she had heard every word. She pressed a hand over her heart and whispered, barely audible, "Why? Why would he do this?" The silence answered her. And in that silence, something inside her hardened, not out of anger yet, not out of revenge, not out of bitterness, but out of survival. She reached for the small wedding ring on her finger. Her hand trembled. She slowly pulled it off, staring at the faint indent left behind from years of wearing it. A single tear slipped down, silent and painful, and she wiped it with the back of her hand. She placed the ring gently on the dresser. Not dramatically, not angrily, just quietly, like a chapter ending. Then she grabbed her purse, her phone, her coat, and walked toward the back stairs. Her breath caught again as she reached the door leading outside. She paused, closed her eyes for a second, and steadied herself. Then she whispered softly, though no one could hear, "Bestie, like and comment. Help this story reach more hearts." She wasn't talking to the house, or to Preston. She was talking to the world, to anyone who had ever been blindsided, broken, or betrayed. She opened the door. Cold December air rushed in, hitting her cheeks as she stepped forward. And just like that, Imani left the Whitman estate behind. Imani never expected her life to fracture before sunrise. Once she slipped back into the bedroom, the walls felt too close, the air too tight, like the room itself was reacting to what she had just heard. She shut the door gently, leaning against it as if she needed the wood to keep her upright. Her breath trembled. Her hands shook. Her mind raced. Preston hadn't just betrayed her. He had spoken about it calmly, like the morning news, and his mother celebrated it. Imani paced once, twice, 3 times, trying to collect pieces of herself that no longer wanted to stay together. The ceiling felt heavier. The carpet under her feet felt uneven. Even the faint echo of Christmas music from downstairs felt wrong, too cheerful, too bright, too disconnected from the devastation happening inside her chest. She moved toward the bed, sat down, and stared at the floor. Her pulse pounded in her ears. She closed her eyes tightly, and suddenly, memory hit. A flash of herself at 16, sitting in the wooden pew of her family's church in rural Georgia. Her mother squeezed her hand during the Christmas service, telling her, "Baby, I know we don't have much, but our love runs deep. Never forget you deserve someone who honors you." Imani exhaled shakily. Her mother's voice felt like comfort and truth, and the exact opposite of what the Whitmans ever gave her. She pressed a hand to her forehead. The memory faded, but the ache stayed. Downstairs, muffled voices continued. "Elizabeth, she was never suited for this family. She doesn't know how to be a wife in a home like ours. Preston, I'll talk to her after the holidays." After the holidays, as if she were an appointment, as if she didn't share his bed, as if she hadn't lost a child with him, as if she hadn't spent years trying to fit into a mold she never belonged in. Imani stood too quickly, the movement almost dizzying. She crossed to the dresser, wiping tears that rolled before she could stop them. She wasn't a woman who spiraled easily. She wasn't someone who lost control. But this cracked something old and deep inside her. She pressed her palms onto the dresser, steadying herself. Her reflection in the mirror looked unfamiliar, eyes wide with shock, cheeks flushed, lips trembling. Not because she didn't love herself, but because she had tried so hard to believe her marriage was solid, even when her instincts hinted otherwise. Another memory surged. 2 years ago, a soft hospital room, stark white sheets, Imani holding Preston's hand as doctors told them their baby was gone. She remembered crying into his chest, remembered him stroking her hair, remembered him whispering, "We'll try again, just not now. When things settle." Things never settled. They drifted. They disconnected. She kept hoping. He kept leaving for work. A shudder rolled through her. She backed away from the dresser and sank onto the edge of the bed. Her hand slid automatically to her wedding ring. She twisted it once, twice, then stopped. What startled her wasn't the ring itself. It was the realization that she felt nothing from it anymore. 8 years of marriage, 1 ring, 1 vow, and all it took was 1 morning to reveal how breakable it all was. Her breath caught as Elizabeth's voice rose again from downstairs. "Preston, you did the right thing. That assistant is far more fitting." Imani was always too focused on climbing some career ladder. A wife should prioritize family first. Imani's jaw tightened hard enough to ache. She had to swallow a harsh rising sting in her throat. The decades of expectation, coded insults, and fake smiles boiled up like a silent scream trapped behind her ribs. She whispered to herself, barely audible, "I didn't lose this marriage by being ambitious. I lost it because you never respected me." Her voice cracked at the end. She tried to breathe, failed, tried again. She knew she had to leave the room before she sobbed loudly enough for someone to hear. She stood and moved with purpose, not fast but firm, like each step was a vow. She opened the small drawer beside the bed and pulled out a pen. Her hands still shook, but she managed to write 3 simple words on a notepad. Had to leave. She tore the page carefully, placed it on her pillow, and set her wedding ring beside it. The ring glinted under the soft morning light, small, delicate, and now meaningless. She stared at it for a long moment, her throat tightening again with a quiet ache. Not sadness at losing Preston. Sadness at losing the version of herself who tried for so long. Downstairs, Elizabeth's laugh floated up again. It was too much. Imani reached for her coat. As she slipped it on, another flash of memory hit her, this one vivid enough to sting. She was 8 years old, sitting on the floor at her grandmother's house. The Christmas tree was small but full of life. Music played softly. Her grandmother held her face gently and told her, "Love should lift you, not shrink you." Imani blinked fast, stopping herself from crying again. She deserved better than whispers and dismissals. She deserved better than being treated like she didn't belong. She deserved better than a marriage where she was the only one fighting. She grabbed her purse and cracked open the bedroom door, making sure no one was near the staircase. The voices drifted from the living room, still celebrating. She moved silently along the hallway, each step steady, controlled. Every part of her wanted to run, but she refused to give them that image of her. She would not flee. She would exit with dignity. The back staircase was dim and quiet. She descended it quickly, letting the railing guide her as her breath shook again. At the bottom, she opened the side door to the yard. Cold winter air rushed in, biting but refreshing. She stepped out, letting the door close softly behind her. For one moment, she stood there in the quiet, her breath visible in the morning chill. The sound of faint laughter drifted through the walls. She closed her eyes briefly. She wasn't part of that world anymore. She wasn't meant to be. She stepped away from the house. Across the driveway, toward her car. She paused for half a second, looked back at the mansion, its tall windows, glowing with warmth she no longer believed in, and whispered to herself, "It's time." Then she slid into her car, shut the door quietly, and pressed her forehead to the steering wheel. Her hands trembled. Her breath shook. Her heart still throbbed painfully, but she was free, and she didn't even fully understand yet how strong she would become. She lifted her head, wiped her cheeks with her sleeve, and took one deep breath. She turned on the ignition. The engine hummed. The driveway stretched ahead. The road to Atlanta waited, cold but full of clarity. She put the car in gear, pressed the accelerator, and left the Whitman estate for the last time. The second climax wasn't just hearing betrayal. It was realizing she had the strength to walk away from it. The moment Imani's car rolled past the iron gates of the Whitman estate, something inside her cracked. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was a quiet fracture, like the final splinter in a glass that had been under pressure for too long. She gripped the steering wheel with both hands as she drove down the long, winding driveway that once felt elegant and impressive, but now felt suffocating. Frost dusted the branches lining the road, and the early morning sky held a pale, muted glow. Her breath caught as she reached the end of the property. She didn't look back. She couldn't. Her chest tightened sharply when her phone buzzed beside her in the passenger seat, Preston's name flashing across the screen. The sight alone sent a cold ripple through her. She turned the phone off. She didn't need to hear anything he had to say, not today, not after what she overheard. She pulled onto the quiet country road and pressed down on the gas slightly, not speeding, just trying to keep her focus forward. Her vision blurred for a second, and she blinked fast. The first tear fell without warning. It slid down her cheek, warm against the cold morning light. Then another, and suddenly the quiet car filled with the sound of broken breathing, slow at first, then deep, then uncontrollable. Her chest heaved. Her shoulders trembled. Her hands tightened so hard around the steering wheel, she felt her nails digging into her palms. It wasn't just the betrayal, though that alone was unbearable. It was the humiliation, the quiet condescension from Elizabeth, the way Preston spoke as if she were a burden instead of a partner, the sudden clarity that she had been fighting for a marriage that the other side had abandoned long ago. She gasped sharply, blinking again and again as the tears blurred her view. She eased off the gas, pulling her car onto the side of the road. The tires crunched softly over the gravel. Imani put the car in park and let her forehead rest against the steering wheel. Her sobs escaped freely now, raw, unfiltered. Every suppressed emotion from the last few years rose at once. The miscarriage, the lonely nights, the pressure to prove herself, the way Elizabeth looked at her like she didn't belong, the moments she allowed herself to shrink to make others comfortable, the hope she held onto even when things felt distant. All of it crashed into her at once. She clutched her chest as if the hurt were physically lodged there, pulsing with every breath. Why wasn't I enough? She whispered, her voice cracking. She wasn't asking Preston. She wasn't asking Elizabeth. She wasn't even asking the assistant who now carried a lie she didn't know was a lie. She was asking herself. Her tears slowed after a minute, still present, still heavy but quieter. She breathed in deeply, then out. Once, twice, 3 times. She forced herself upright again, wiped her cheeks, and looked ahead. Atlanta's skyline waited miles away, a faint silhouette in the distance, a reminder of who she was outside the Whitmans, a reminder of the world she fought her way into without anyone's help. She straightened her posture slightly. She wasn't powerless, she wasn't helpless, and she wasn't going to let that house break her. Her mother's voice floated gently through her memory. Baby, don't let anyone convince you that your worth is small. They can't take what they didn't build. Her breath steadied. Her shaking eased. She placed her hands on the wheel again and pulled back onto the road. The quiet hum of the engine felt calming now, like a gentle anchor helping her stay present. As the minutes passed, the landscape shifted from rural quiet to suburban neighborhoods, then to the outskirts of the city. Christmas decorations lined some of the streets, wreaths on doors, lights around windows, inflatable figures on lawns. Every house she passed reminded her of the warmth she grew up with. Not wealth, not fancy furniture, but laughter, home-cooked meals, loud cousins, gospel music, and love that didn't need to be earned. A soft ache pressed against her heart. She wished she were there now. The closer she got to downtown Atlanta, the more calm she forced into her breathing. Her tears had dried, leaving faint streaks across her cheeks, but her eyes still stung. When she reached the parking garage of her law firm, she pulled into her reserved spot and sat motionless for a moment, staring through the windshield at the concrete wall ahead. It was Christmas Day. The building was dark, empty, silent. But inside that building was something she needed: clarity, documentation, power. She grabbed her purse and stepped out of the car. The cold garage air brushed her face, waking her senses again. She walked toward the elevator, her footsteps echoing softly. The elevator doors opened onto the 18th floor. The lights were dim, save for the emergency bulbs glowing faintly. It felt strange being in the office on a holiday, like an abandoned stage after the show had ended. She walked slowly down the hallway toward her office. Her heels clicked softly. Her breathing stayed controlled. She opened her door, stepped inside, and turned on the lamp near her desk. Golden light filled the room, illuminating her degrees on the wall, her meticulously organized files, and the small photo frame holding a picture of her and Preston back when things were still beautiful. She turned the frame face down. That part of her life wasn't gone yet, but it no longer held space here. Imani moved toward the bookshelf in the corner, the one that looked decorative but actually hid a steel safe behind a sliding panel. With a push, the panel shifted to the side, revealing the safe. Her fingers paused briefly on the cold metal. This wasn't revenge. This wasn't spite. This wasn't about proving anything to Elizabeth. It wasn't even about the assistant. This was about her dignity. She typed the combination, turned the wheel, and opened the door. Inside were important documents, investments, contracts, and the one she needed most: the prenuptial agreement. She pulled it out carefully and placed it on her desk, smoothing the pages with a calm hand. It wasn't anger driving her now. It was clarity. She sat down in her leather chair, took a deep breath, and began reading line by line. Clause by clause. Every promise, every protection, every loophole, every consequence. Her eyes scanned the section regarding infidelity, firm, unyielding, and signed by Preston himself. Her law firm had drafted it to protect her interests when she married into a wealthy family hostile to her presence. She remembered the uncomfortable discussion with Preston when she insisted the prenup include strict terms. He said, "You'll never need this. I'm not that kind of man." Her brows lowered slightly at the memory. The clauses were clear. She wasn't going to beg him to stay. She wasn't going to cry in front of him. She wasn't going to fight for someone who had already chosen someone else. She would handle this the way she handled every challenge in her life. With strength, with intelligence, with precision. Her phone buzzed again on the desk. She ignored it. Instead, she opened her laptop, pulled up the shared financial accounts, and began the process of documenting every transaction, asset, and liability. Her breath steadied the more she worked. Each click of the mouse felt like her reclaiming another piece of control. The sun outside began to rise higher, casting soft beams through her office window. By late morning, her fear had been replaced by certainty. Her grief had been replaced by direction. Her heartbreak had been replaced by determination. She closed the laptop softly. She looked down at the prenup once more. This wasn't the moment she planned for her life, but it was the moment that would change everything. She sat back in her chair quietly, feeling the shift happen inside her. The woman who woke up in the Whitman estate that morning was gone. The woman sitting in this office was someone else entirely, someone stronger, someone clearer, someone who knew her worth and would never let anyone diminish it again. And she was only getting started. The quiet inside Imani's office felt strange on Christmas Day. Not uncomfortable, just different. Everything in the Whitman mansion had been layered with noise, chatter, expectations, judged, silences, and the constant pressure to fit into a mold designed without her in mind. But here, in her office high above Atlanta, the world finally fell still. The soft hum of the HVAC and the steady tick of the wall clock were the only sounds. And yet, somehow, those quiet rhythms felt powerful. Imani took another breath, slow, intentional. She had cried all she was going to cry today. She had broken all she was going to break. Everything left now was movement, decisions, forward motion, the kind of momentum she excelled in when life demanded her strongest self. She leaned forward in her leather chair and flipped to the next page of the prenup. Her fingers steadied. The trembling had stopped somewhere between page 7 and 8. Maybe it was the lawyer in her taking over. Maybe it was the woman who rose through adversity too many times to crumble for long. Or maybe it was simply that once betrayal becomes undeniable, the heart stops pleading for explanations and starts planning exits. She wasn't reading the document to punish Preston. She wasn't reading it to prove a point. She was reading it to protect herself, her future, and her dignity. Clause 14. In the event of marital misconduct resulting in emotional or reputational harm. Clause 17. Repayment of financial contributions within 90 days upon confirmed breach. Clause 22. Right to immediate legal separation. Each section felt like a light switching on in a dark room. Imani closed the document and placed her palms flat on the desk. The decision was made. Not tomorrow. Not after the holidays. Now. A deep breath filled her lungs. Her voice was barely a whisper. It's time to end this. Those words weren't bitter. They weren't angry. They were clear. She reached for her phone, not to answer Preston, but to contact someone she trusted far more, her colleague and longtime friend, attorney Nina Carter. Nina answered on the second ring, voice groggy but alert. Imani, is everything okay? It's early and it's Christmas. Did something happen? Imani closed her eyes briefly, steadying herself. I need your help. I wouldn't call if it wasn't urgent. Nina's tone shifted instantly, ready, professional, concerned. Tell me. I'm filing for divorce, Imani said softly. Today. And I want everything done properly. There were 2 seconds of silence on the line. Then Nina exhaled. Say no more. I'm coming to the office. Give me 20 minutes. Imani's throat tightened, but she nodded even though Nina couldn't see her. Thank you. Text me what you've gathered from the prenup, Nina added. I'll pick up coffee on the way. When the call ended, Imani placed her phone on the desk and leaned back again. She let her eyes drift to the framed degrees on the wall. Juris Doctorate. Bar license. Awards for high-profile cases she'd fought and won. She had always been strong in every room except the Whitman household. Somehow, that home made her feel like she had to shrink. No more. The elevator dinged down the hall, and soon Nina entered the office, carrying 2 cups of coffee and a look of sharp focus. You look like you haven't slept, Nina said softly, setting the drinks down. I didn't, Imani replied, voice calm but raw. You were right about Preston. I should have listened a long time ago. Nina took off her coat and pulled a chair beside her. Tell me what happened. Imani explained everything, every whisper, every cruel phrase from Elizabeth, every soft-spoken confession Preston made as if she were disposable. She held nothing back. When she finished, Nina's expression hardened. He said that? With his mother? And they planned to tell you after the holidays? Yes. Imani. Nina shook her head, fire blazing in her eyes. You don't deserve this. You never did. Imani breathed in deeply. I'm not staying another moment in a marriage where I am an afterthought. Nina reached for the prenup, scanning through it with practiced speed. This agreement is solid, very solid. The clauses favor you significantly. He has no room to maneuver around them. Imani nodded. She didn't feel triumphant. She didn't feel vindicated. She felt centered, like she was finally stepping into a version of her life that trusted her instincts. "We'll file the complaint with the court tomorrow," Nina continued. "Judges are off duty today, but electronic filing is always open. I'll start drafting everything now." "Thank you," Imani said, her voice steady. "I need this done cleanly." Nina placed a reassuring hand on her forearm. "I've got you. You're going to walk out of this stronger." Imani nodded again, but deep inside, another part of her whispered, "I already am." Together, they began organizing documents, bank statements, property lists, business contracts, email files. Imani provided detailed explanations for each, her professional tone settling into place. Each minute strengthened her composure. Each legal decision rebuilt her sense of stability. The line between attorney and betrayed wife blurred, merging into a woman taking control of her life with precision and power. While Nina drafted the initial complaint, Imani reviewed the financial repercussions for Preston's company. The prenup required him to repay her original investment into his startup, funds she contributed before his first major funding round. That repayment alone would shake his company's liquidity. "Do you want to enforce everything strictly?" Nina asked quietly. Imani's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "Yes," she said, not with spite, but clarity. "He made his choices. I'll make mine." The printer whirred as pages of the complaint began to slide out, formal, binding, irreversible. Each sheet felt like a brick being laid on a new foundation of her life. While Nina assembled the packet, Imani's phone buzzed again. This time she checked it. Dozens of messages. From Preston. "Where are you? We need to talk. Imani, please call me. I'm worried. This isn't how I wanted you to find out. Please don't do anything rash." More calls from Elizabeth. More from numbers she didn't recognize, likely family members. Imani muted the phone. She wasn't running. She wasn't arguing. She wasn't begging. She was acting. A knock on the half-open office door interrupted her thoughts. It was the firm's security guard, Mr. Lawson. He blinked in surprise. "Miss Hale, I didn't expect anyone to be in today." Imani stood, offering a small smile. "Just tying up some things." "Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawson." "You too, ma'am." His eyes softened. "Stay warm out there." When he left, Imani returned to her desk. Nina slid the fresh stack of legal papers toward her. The complaint. "If you sign here, the filing will be official." Imani took the pen. Her hand didn't shake. She scribbled her signature in one smooth motion. It was done. The shift inside her was immediate, like a weight lifting, like a voice inside her whispering, "You chose yourself." Nina exhaled softly. "I'm proud of you." Imani closed her eyes for a moment before responding. For the first time in a long time, "I'm proud of me too." They worked for another hour to finalize everything. Once Nina filed the paperwork electronically, the divorce was officially in motion. The moment Nina left the office, Imani stood alone in the quiet, the sun now bright enough to cast warm light across her desk. She walked to the window. Atlanta stretched out beneath her, strong, steady, full of life. The city she built her career in. The city she loved. The city that would become the backdrop of her rebirth. Her reflection in the glass looked different now. Stronger, sharper, more certain. She wasn't healed yet, but she had taken the first step. And that step changed everything. The morning after filing the complaint, Atlanta's sky was a soft gray, quiet, still, almost respectful. Imani stood in her bathroom mirror, brushing her curls back from her face, her expression calm. Steady. Not the woman who cried in her car yesterday. Not the woman who broke on the staircase of the Whitman estate. This version of her was carved from silence, focus, and a clarity she wished she had gained years ago. Her phone buzzed again, Preston calling for what must have been the 50th time. She ignored it, slipped the phone into her purse and grabbed her keys. Today, the documents would be delivered. The process server Nina hired, a dignified older woman named Ms. Turner, was already waiting in the parking lot of Imani's townhouse. When Imani approached, she greeted her warmly. "You ready for this?" Ms. Turner asked, sliding a folder into her briefcase. "Yes," Imani replied. "I'm more ready than I've ever been." Ms. Turner gave her a respectful nod. "Then let's make sure it's handled properly." Imani watched as the server drove off toward Preston's temporary address, the upscale condo he used for business trips. She didn't want to see the exchange. Her heart didn't need one more bruise today. Instead, she headed to her office downtown for a meeting she didn't plan on attending originally. But now she couldn't ignore handling the financial implications of the prenup. By the time she parked and headed into the building, her phone buzzed repeatedly. She didn't check it, not until she reached her office door and turned the handle. Right as she stepped inside, her screen lit up again, this time with a message from Nina. "He's been served." Imani inhaled deeply, a quiet, grounding breath. It was done. The server had walked into the sleek lobby of Preston's condo building, asked for him firmly, and handed him the envelope without hesitation. Preston Whitman, billionaire tech founder, media figure, board darling, was now officially a man facing the consequences he never expected. Imani set her purse down, moved to her desk, and finally checked her phone. Missed calls from Preston, voicemails, text messages, even a few from Elizabeth. She didn't open any of them. She scrolled instead to the voicemail transcripts her phone automatically generated. The first one: "Imani, why would you file something without talking to me? I deserve a conversation. Call me back." The second: "This is ridiculous. We can fix this. You're being emotional. Just call me." She stopped there. He was already deflecting, already minimizing, already behaving like the crisis was her overreaction instead of his betrayal. She set the phone down as the office door swung open. Nina entered, holding a coffee. "Thought you might need this." Imani accepted it gratefully. "Thank you. Let me guess," Nina said, settling into the chair across from her. "He's blowing up your phone?" Imani nodded. "Voicemails, texts, you name it." "And Elizabeth?" Imani let out a humorless breath. "Of course. Let it all sit unread," Nina advised. "Everything goes through me now. You don't have to talk to him directly at all." Imani nodded. "I don't plan to." Before they could continue, Nina's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, eyebrows lifting. "Well," she murmured, "that didn't take long." "What happened?" Imani asked calmly. Preston went straight to the office. Nina's lips twitched into the faintest smirk. "And he brought Claire with him." Imani's heart clenched, not with jealousy, but with bitter clarity. "Of course he did." Apparently, Nina continued, the moment he read the documents, he stormed into his company demanding explanations, and Claire looked confused. "Confused?" Imani echoed softly. "Yes. Witnesses say she kept saying she didn't want any trouble, that she didn't understand what was happening." Preston looked furious enough to break something. Imani leaned back in her chair, an odd wave of calm washing over her. "So he's unraveling." "It's starting," Nina said. "The prenup is airtight. Once the board learns he has to repay that investment immediately, things will shift fast." Imani looked toward the window, watching the city move below. She never wanted his company to fail. She never wanted to ruin his reputation. She just wanted her life back. Down at Preston's company headquarters, chaos had already erupted. Preston paced his office like a man backed into a corner, papers scattered on his desk. Claire stood near the door, wringing her hands. "I didn't know she would leave," Claire said quietly. "I didn't expect things to go like this." Preston ignored her. "She filed for divorce," Preston barked, throwing the envelope onto his desk. "On Christmas Day, without even giving me a chance." "A chance to do what?" Claire whispered, voice trembling. "You told your mother." "Don't," he snapped, pointing at her. "Don't bring my mother into this." Claire pressed her lips together. The tension in the room was thick and suffocating. The CFO knocked once, then pushed the door open. "Preston," he said with urgency, "the board has been alerted about the prenup requirement. They're concerned about the repayment clause." Preston's face paled. "They can't be serious. They know I can cover." "They're not worried about today," the CFO cut in. "They're worried about what happens after. This is a PR nightmare, and investors don't respond well to instability." Preston froze. Claire stepped back until her shoulders touched the wall. The CFO continued, "You need to handle this immediately. If the press gets a hold of anything—" "They won't," Preston snapped. "I'll fix it." "How?" the CFO asked bluntly. Preston's chest rose and fell sharply. He didn't have an answer. Back in her office, Imani watched the skyline as she sipped her coffee. Nina slid a stack of documents toward her. These are the asset disclosures we'll need to attach. I'll also file a freeze on joint accounts to prevent any sudden withdrawals. Imani nodded. Do that. What about the investment repayment? Nina asked. Want to enforce that immediately or give him 30 days? Imani didn't hesitate. Enforce it. Nina smiled approvingly. Good. They continued working through the details, professional, focused, unwavering. Half an hour later, Imani's office phone rang. She didn't move to answer it. Nina reached over and pressed the silent button. Everything about this moment felt surreal. Not painful, not chaotic, not overwhelming. Just clear. Her heart finally understood that the marriage had ended long before the documents existed. The affair hadn't truly destroyed it. The indifference did. The quiet, emotional distance, the excuses, the avoidance, the way he let his mother diminish her without speaking up. The betrayal simply revealed the truth. Imani, Nina said softly, observing her face. You're handling this with grace. Imani nodded faintly. I've spent too much time making myself small. Those days are over. She stood and walked to the window. Atlanta stretched beneath her. Buildings, traffic, people moving with purpose. The city had carried her from a scholarship kid to a respected attorney. It had held her even when the Whitmans never truly did. It had given her a path, a title, a voice. And now, it would become the place she rebuilt her identity. Her phone buzzed again with a message from an unknown number. Nina glanced at it when the preview lit up. This is Elizabeth Whitman. Call me now. Imani smiled coldly. Not a chance. Nina deleted the message. A knock echoed faintly from the hall, and the receptionist peeked in. Miss Hale, there's a delivery here for you. Imani frowned. On Christmas weekend? It looks urgent. From the courier. Imani and Nina exchanged glances. The receptionist stepped aside, revealing a sealed envelope stamped with the company logo belonging to Preston's legal team. Nina took it cautiously and opened it. Inside was a single typed page, requesting immediate discussion and potential reconciliation meeting. Signed, Preston Whitman. Imani let out a slow, humorless breath. Of course. He panicked, Nina said, tearing the note in half. He's scrambling. Imani returned to her chair. He can scramble all he wants. My decision is made. She glanced at the clock. It was still early, still quiet, still steady. This chapter of her life wasn't ending tomorrow. It ended the moment she walked down that back staircase, the moment she closed the door of her car, the moment she turned on the ignition. Everything after was just paperwork. She lifted her coffee cup and whispered more to herself than to Nina. I chose me. That's enough. Imani spent the rest of the morning reviewing financial documents with Nina, drafting the emails needed to secure her accounts, and submitting official forms to the Fulton County clerk. Each signature she wrote, each attachment she uploaded, each confirmation email arriving. In her inbox felt like another piece of her power returning to her hands. But the moment she stepped out of her office and onto the quiet 18th floor, hallway, her phone vibrated again, buzzing repeatedly, urgently, desperately. She glanced at the screen. Preston 21 missed calls. Preston 11 new text messages. Unknown number, likely Elizabeth, 3 calls. Claire, 1 missed call. Imani exhaled slowly, thumb hovering over the screen before she pressed block with an unbothered flick of her finger. There was nothing left to say. Not then. Not tomorrow. Not ever. Her marriage didn't end because of the assistant. It ended because Preston allowed others to convince him his wife's strength was a flaw. She turned the phone off completely as she walked toward the elevator. Not silent mode. Not do not disturb. Off. It felt symbolic, like shutting a door that would not be opened again. When she reached the lobby, the security guard, Mr. Lawson, lifted a hand politely. Heading home for the day, Miss Hale? Need me to walk you to your car? Imani shook her head. I'm okay. Thanks for checking. He smiled. You take care of yourself now. That's the plan, she replied softly. Outside, the wind brushed past her, sharp but refreshing. She pulled her coat tighter as she walked to her car, her heels tapping a steady rhythm that matched the new cadence of her heart. Focused, rooted, done with anything that made her small. She slid into the driver's seat and stared straight ahead for a few seconds, letting the quiet settle. For years she had tiptoed through holidays with the Whitmans, hiding the parts of herself they found too bold, too opinionated, too ambitious. For years, she had silenced her instincts to maintain peace. For years, she had convinced herself that love meant adjusting everything about herself to fit someone else's expectations. But today she chose herself. She turned on the ignition and drove out of the parking garage, heading toward her townhouse. On the highway, the city moved normally, cars in steady lanes, people heading to family gatherings, lights blinking along storefronts. A few radio hosts laughed on a commercial she flipped past before finally turning the radio off. Silence felt better. It gave her space to breathe. Her mind replayed Preston's whisper. Claire understands me. She's giving me a child. Her jaw clenched. She wasn't angry anymore. Not the trembling, heart-cracking anger that crushed her on the staircase. Now, it was something stronger, sharpened, refined, free. A red light stopped her near the heart of Midtown. A couple crossed the street holding hands, bundled in coats, smiling. Imani watched them without bitterness. Another flash of her past rose, this time soft and almost comforting. She was 22, sitting outside her first corporate internship building, eating lunch alone. She didn't know anyone there. She felt out of place. But a mentor told her then, "You belong everywhere you work for. Don't shrink just because others are intimidated." She held on to that advice for years, until Preston's world made her forget it. Not anymore. The light turned green, and she kept driving. When she reached home, she parked in her driveway and stepped out. The townhouse looked peaceful in the early afternoon sunlight. Clean brick, tidy porch, potted winter plants she bought on a whim 1 month ago. This was hers. Her space. Her energy. No mother-in-law judging her decor. No whispered remarks about proper wives. No walking on eggshells. Inside, she placed her keys on the entry table and took off her coat. She paused briefly when she saw a small ornament hanging from her doorknob, a holiday gift from her elderly neighbor, Mrs. Rosen, a cinnamon-scented pine cone. Imani smiled softly and whispered, "Thank you," though Mrs. Rosen wasn't there. She walked into the kitchen, poured herself a glass of cold water, and took several slow sips as she leaned against the counter. Her body felt lighter, fragile in some ways, but freed in others. Her phone, still turned off, sat quietly in her bag. She didn't touch it. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to sit on the couch, curl her legs beneath her, and breathe without bracing for harsh words or backhanded comments. A quiet knock at the door startled her slightly. She hesitated, then looked through the peephole. It was her younger cousin, Tasha, wearing a bright red beanie and holding a bag of takeout. "Girl," Tasha said the moment Imani opened the door, stepping inside with her mouth already moving. "I know it's Christmas, but something told me you weren't with those people today. And my intuition was right because your face looks like someone threw a brick at your heart." Imani blinked, almost laughing at her cousin's dramatic honesty. "Tasha, don't even explain yet," Tasha insisted, dropping the takeout bag on the counter. "I brought chicken and mashed potatoes and that cornbread you like. Sit down, eat. I can tell you're running on fumes." Imani sat slowly, gratitude settling in her chest like warmth. Tasha unpacked the food and handed her a plate. "All right, tell me everything," Imani began from the moment she stepped down the staircase. As she spoke, Tasha's face shifted from sympathetic to furious to stunned. "He said what?" Tasha burst out, nearly knocking over a fork. "With his whole chest? In his mama's house?" Imani nodded silently, taking a slow bite of food. "And Elizabeth just sat there co-signing it? Oh, I wish I'd been a ghost in that house. I would have knocked down every garland on the way out." Imani chuckled under her breath. Just a small sound, but it was the first genuine laugh she'd let escape since the morning. Tasha softened then, sliding into the seat across from her. "Cousin, I'm proud of you," she said gently. "You didn't wait for him to come up with another lie. You didn't let him twist this. You left, and you're standing tall." Imani swallowed. "It hurts. I know." Tasha squeezed her hand. "But pain doesn't mean you're wrong. It means you care, and you cared alone too long." Imani nodded slowly. Her cousin stayed for hours, talking, eating with her, cleaning up, making jokes, distracting her, comforting her. When she finally left near dusk, Imani felt steadier. Alone again, she walked into her bedroom and changed into comfortable clothes. Her mind, though calmer, was still processing. The man she loved had spoken about her like she was just a placeholder. His mother had celebrated her replacement. His assistant was unknowingly tangled in a lie Elizabeth helped shape, and Imani had walked away with grace. The night sky deepened outside her windows. She turned off the lights and let the quiet settle over her like a blanket. Before she went to bed, she turned her phone back on, for one reason only, to block more numbers. The phone exploded with notifications instantly. 91 text messages, 34 missed calls, voicemails, emails, social media tags. She ignored all of it, except one text. From Preston. Please, I need to talk. I didn't mean for this to blow up like this. You don't understand. Please give me a chance. She stared at the message for a moment. Then she placed her thumb on the screen, hovered briefly, and blocked his number. She turned the phone off again and placed it face down on the nightstand. The finality of it didn't sting. It didn't crush her. It didn't pull at her heart. It simply settled. Like closing a book she no longer wanted to reread. She slid under the blankets, her breath steady, her body tired but peaceful. Tomorrow, the world might talk. Tomorrow, Preston might panic even more. Tomorrow, Elizabeth might unleash chaos. But tonight, Imani slept in a home where her worth wasn't questioned. The next morning arrived quietly. A faint beam of sunlight slipped through the blinds of Imani's bedroom, brushing across her cheek. She opened her eyes slowly, the exhaustion still lingering in her bones. Her mind fluttered briefly, just long enough to remember yesterday. The whispers, the betrayal, the signatures, the certainty. But instead of tears, a steady calm settled inside her chest. Yesterday ended a marriage. Today began her healing. She sat up in bed carefully, the sheets shifting as she stretched her arms overhead. Her muscles ached slightly, not from physical strain, but from the emotional tightening she'd carried for far too long. She reached for the glass of water on her nightstand and took a slow sip. Another breath, another moment of stillness. She slid out of bed and walked to the bathroom. The face staring back at her in the mirror did not look defeated. Her eyes were tired, yes. Her curls were a bit frizzy, but her shoulders were no longer hunched. Her stare no longer pleaded for answers. She looked like a woman rediscovering her reflection, piece by piece. Imani tied her robe and filled the sink with warm water. She splashed her face, letting the heat ease the tension in her jaw. She brushed her teeth slowly, washed her face with care, and stood for a moment just existing. When she finished, she wrapped her hair in a satin scarf and walked to the kitchen. She brewed a fresh pot of coffee, something simple, grounding. The rich aroma filled the air, and she inhaled deeply. As she stirred sugar into her mug, she glanced at her phone on the counter. She didn't turn it on. Not yet. Instead, she opened the curtains and let the morning light fill the room. The city outside felt alive, humming even the day after Christmas. Cars rolled through the streets. Neighbors walked their dogs. Children in coats played in nearby yards, chasing each other with leftover holiday excitement. Life moved on. And so would she. After finishing her coffee, she walked into her closet and pulled out soft leggings, a warm sweater, and a denim jacket. Comfortable, familiar, not chosen to impress anyone but herself. Before leaving her home, she picked up a small box she hadn't touched in years, a box of old photographs, letters, and keepsakes from the life she had before becoming a Whitman. She placed it on the couch. She wasn't ready to open it yet, but she would, soon. She stepped outside, locking the door behind her, and breathed in the crisp Atlanta air. Her car keys jingled softly as she walked toward her vehicle. Her first destination wasn't her office. It was her childhood church. She hadn't been there in a long time, caught up in corporate meetings, Preston's business trips, and family obligations that pulled her away from the place where she once felt grounded. But her soul needed something calm, something familiar, something that reminded her of who she was before life forced her to toughen up. She drove across town to a cozy neighborhood where cars lined the streets and row houses stood shoulder to shoulder. The small red brick church, with its white door and simple bell tower, looked exactly the same as it did when she was younger. She parked in front of the building, taking a slow breath as memories swarmed her, singing in the choir as a little girl, crying into her grandmother's lap after a hard day at school, listening to sermons about strength, forgiveness, and self-worth, hearing her mother whisper, "God didn't make you second to anyone, baby." She pushed the door open and stepped inside. The scent of old wooden pews and candles wrapped around her immediately. Sunlight filtered through stained glass, painting gentle colors on the floor. An elderly woman arranging hymnals looked up. "Well, I'll be Imani Hale. Haven't seen you in a while." Imani smiled gently. "Hi, Sister June." The woman walked over, wiping her hands on her apron. "You look tired, child. You okay?" Imani hesitated, her throat tightening slightly. "Not really, but I'm trying." Sister June reached out, cupped her cheek and nodded softly. "The trying counts. Sometimes it's the hardest part." Imani swallowed the emotion rising in her chest. "Can I sit for a bit? Stay as long as you need." Imani walked to a pew in the middle row and sat down. The silence felt healing. Not empty, not lonely. Healing. She clasped her hands together and closed her eyes. She didn't pray for Preston. She didn't pray for Elizabeth. She didn't pray for the assistant. She prayed for herself, for strength, for clarity, for the courage to rebuild without bitterness, for the ability to let go of the version of herself who tried to be enough for a family that never saw her value. Tears slid down her cheeks, but this time they weren't desperate. They were cleansing, quiet, necessary. After a few minutes, she opened her eyes, wiped her cheeks, and exhaled softly. Her heart felt lighter. She stood, thanked Sister June again, and headed back to her car. Her next stop was her parents' house on the south side of Atlanta. She hadn't called ahead. She didn't want pity or questions before she was ready. She just wanted to be held by people who loved her without conditions. When she pulled into the driveway, her mother opened the door before she even got out of the car, as if she felt her daughter's presence from inside the kitchen. "Baby?" her mother called out, stepping onto the porch. Imani's knees weakened slightly at the sound. "Hey, Mama," she whispered. Her mother crossed the yard in seconds and wrapped her arms around her. Warm, strong, unwavering. Imani clung to her, burying her face in her mother's shoulder. "I'm so sorry," her mother whispered, rocking her gently. "I'm so sorry for whatever they did to you. But you're home now." Imani's tears returned, but these tears didn't drown her. They lifted her, little by little. Inside the house, the smell of baked ham, sweet potatoes, and cinnamon filled the air. Her father stepped out of the kitchen with a smile that faded the moment he saw her expression. "What happened?" he asked, already reaching for her hand. Imani shook her head softly. "I'll tell you everything." They sat at the dining table, her mother on her left, her father on her right, both holding her hands. She told them the truth. Their reactions came fast, her mother gasping loudly, hand flying to her chest, her father standing abruptly as if ready to drive to Preston's condo and demand answers. But they listened. They let her talk. They let her cry. They let her fall apart without judgment. Her father sat down again, jaw tight. "You're not going back, you hear me? No man who talks about you that way deserves you." "I'm not," Imani said firmly. Her mother squeezed her hand. "Good. You come here any time you need to breathe. You hear me? Anytime." Imani nodded, overwhelmed with love. They talked for hours. Her mother made her a plate of food, even though Imani said she wasn't hungry. Eventually, she ate anyway, feeling warmth for the first time since yesterday. Her father walked her to the car when she was ready to leave. "I'm proud of you," he said quietly. "Not for leaving him, for finally choosing yourself." Imani hugged him tightly. Back in her car, she stared at the steering wheel for a moment. The old Imani would have driven home still feeling broken. The woman she was becoming drove back feeling whole. When she returned to her townhouse, the sun was dipping behind the buildings. The holiday lights along her street glowed softly. She stepped inside her home, slipped off her shoes, and picked up the small box of keepsakes she left on the couch earlier. She carried it to her bedroom and sat on her bed. Her fingers lifted the lid slowly. Inside were pieces of the girl she once was, a locket from her grandmother, honor roll certificates, a dried rose from her college graduation, an old copy of her first internship acceptance letter, photos of her and her parents at different landmarks across Georgia. She smiled softly, eyes misting. These memories weren't painful. They were reminders, reminders of who she had always been, reminders of how far she had come. Reminders that she had built her life from grit and faith, without anyone's permission. She placed the items back into the box and slid it under her bed gently. Then she stood, walked to her bathroom, and looked in the mirror again. This time, she smiled at her reflection, a soft smile, a strong smile, a smile that said, "I'm coming back to myself She washed her face again, tied her scarf, brushed her lashes, and pulled on a soft robe before curling up on her couch with a blanket. The house was quiet. The air felt peaceful. The weight she'd carried for years was lifting inch by inch. This was the beginning of her becoming whole again. The day after visiting her family, Imani woke up feeling clearer than she had in months. Her sleep wasn't perfect, but it was deeper than it had been since before the betrayal. She stretched beneath her covers, inhaling slowly before sitting up. She stood and opened her curtains. Morning sunlight washed through the room, soft and warm. A new thought surfaced in her mind, unexpected but persistent. She needed closure. Not emotional closure, physical closure. She needed to see the Whitman estate one last time. Not as a daughter-in-law, not as a woman trying to fit in, not as someone hoping for acceptance, but as someone who had finally walked away. At first, she dismissed the idea. Why go back? Why risk another wave of pain? But the thought didn't leave. It grew. By mid-morning, she found herself showered, dressed, and gripping her keys with a steady hand. She didn't tell anyone where she was going. She needed to do this alone. The drive out of the city was quiet. She kept the radio off, her thoughts filling the silence. The bare winter trees lining the highway felt symbolic, stripped down, but still standing tall. Halfway there, her stomach tightened. Memories flickered, Preston smiling at her during their first Christmas together. Elizabeth giving her a floral apron with a forced smile. Every moment she felt the need to prove herself worthy. Those memories tightened her grip on the steering wheel, but they didn't stop her from driving. She pulled off the main road and approached the long lane that led to the Whitman estate. The iron gates loomed ahead, tall and unbothered, as if the house behind them wasn't a place of pain but a monument to old wealth. She parked in front of the gate. Her heart beat steadily, not fast, not panicked, just steady. She got out of the car, pulled her coat tighter, and pressed the intercom button. A moment later, a voice crackled through. "Whitman residence. It's Imani," she said calmly. "I only need a few minutes. No confrontation, no drama." The person on the other end hesitated, then responded, "Mrs. Witt, Miss Hale, they aren't home." "Good." She didn't want them to be. "Can you let me in?" she asked softly. Silence. A faint click. The gates pulled open. She walked back to her car, drove onto the property, and parked in the driveway. The house loomed above her, grand, perfectly maintained, cold. She stepped out and stared at it. Once she had imagined raising children there. Once she had tried decorating the hallways with small touches of herself. Once she believed the house would eventually feel like hers. It never had. She took a deep breath and walked toward the front steps. The key in her purse still worked. No one had thought to change the locks yet. Inside, the foyer sat quiet. No Christmas music, no chatter, no forced smiles. The garlands were still up, faint pine scent lingering. Each step she took echoed softly through the vast space. She paused near the staircase, the same place where everything shattered 2 days ago. She reached out and touched the railing, remembering how she had held onto it for balance when her world collapsed. Her chest tightened, but not with sorrow, with closure. She moved past the staircase and walked slowly into the living room. The fireplace was cold. The armchair where Elizabeth sat making judgments about her was empty. The spot where Preston whispered betrayal now held nothing but silence. Imani wrapped her arms around herself briefly, not from sadness, but from the chill inside the house. She kept walking, moving through each room she had once tried to make her own. The dining room where she endured quiet insults disguised as polite comments. The kitchen where she offered to help and was told, "We have staff for that." The back patio where she once tried hosting a summer dinner that Elizabeth criticized behind her back. Every space tasted of old wounds. She paused in the doorway of the parlor, fingertips brushing the edge of the doorframe. Was this the place where she lost her identity, or the place where she would find it again? A sudden thought hit her, quiet at first, but strong enough to make her inhale sharply. What if this place didn't have to stay a symbol of pain? She stepped farther inside the room, letting her eyes travel over the high ceilings, the large windows, the polished floors. It could be more. It could be transformed. It could belong to her, not as Preston's wife, but as Imani Hale, a woman who built her life on her own terms. The idea unfurled slowly inside her. She walked deeper into the room. She saw it. Not the ghosts of the Whitman family's expectations, not the weight of Elizabeth's disapproval, but something new. A center, a safe space, a home for women who needed resources, support, and a fresh start. She shook her head gently, trying to dismiss the idea, but it only grew. She walked down the hall and stepped into what was once the Whitman family library. Bookshelves lined the walls. Her gaze moved across the tall shelves, so many of them filled with books she had never been welcome to choose. This could be a reading room for young women studying to rebuild their careers. She stepped farther in. This could be a computer lab. This could be a counseling room. This could be a community haven. She moved through the house room by room, and in her mind, each became something new. The grand dining room, a workshop space. The sunroom, an art therapy studio. The downstairs office, legal aid consultations. The upstairs guest rooms, temporary housing for women escaping broken marriages or dangerous relationships. The transformation became so vivid, she could almost hear the laughter and footsteps of a different kind of family, one she would choose. Her chest warmed. This wasn't revenge. This wasn't about Preston. This wasn't about proving anything to Elizabeth. This was about turning her pain into purpose. She walked toward the main staircase again, her steps calm, her heart steady. She climbed halfway, then paused, looking back at the ground floor as if seeing it through new eyes. Suddenly a memory rose uninvited, the Christmas when she and Preston first visited the estate as newlyweds. She had worn her best coat. Elizabeth had scanned her from head to toe, nodded politely and said, "Well, we'll see how long this lasts." At the time, Imani laughed it off. Now, she saw it for what it was, a warning. She continued up the stairs, reaching the second floor. She walked down the hallway toward the bedroom she once shared with Preston. She opened the door. It looked untouched, perfectly neat, cold. Her gaze drifted to the spot where she left her ring and note. They were gone. Good. She had no use for either. She turned to leave, but on her way out, she paused again, standing in the middle of the hallway. The walls were ornate, but empty. The idea returned, not quietly this time, but boldly. Buy the house. Change it, own it, transform it. Her pulse quickened, not from fear, but from the thrill of envisioning something powerful. She returned downstairs and took one last look around the foyer. For years, this house felt like a cage. Now, it felt like a blank page. She pulled out her phone and searched the county property records. The estate was still under Elizabeth's name. That made sense. Family homes like this were often inherited and kept in trust. Her jaw tightened slightly. If she made an offer, Elizabeth would resist. She knew that. She knew Elizabeth would scream, argue, threaten, but Imani no longer cared about her approval. She walked out the door, letting it close behind her with a soft click. Outside, the cold air wrapped around her. She stood on the steps for a moment, simply breathing. This time, when she looked at the house, she didn't see memories. She saw potential. She returned to her car and sat quietly, hands resting lightly on the steering wheel. Then she smiled, small at first, then wider. "This is how I take my power back," she whispered. "Not by fighting the Whitman family, not by drowning in heartbreak, not by clinging to the past, but by rebuilding her life on ground she once walked in pain." She drove away from the estate, not broken, not afraid, but ready to build something new, ready to reclaim every part of herself, ready to turn the place that shattered her into the place she would rise from. By the time she reached the main road, the vision had settled firmly in her heart. She would buy the estate. She would transform it. She would build a haven, not because she needed to prove anything to Preston, but because she finally understood that every ending can be a doorway, and she was ready to walk through hers. Imani arrived back at her townhouse late in the morning, her mind buzzing with the stunning clarity that hit her inside the estate. She placed her keys gently on the entry table, hung up her coat, and tried to steady her breathing. She had walked out of that mansion not as a defeated woman, but as someone ready to rebuild from the ashes. The vision blooming in her chest was stronger than she expected. She knew she wasn't fully healed, far from it, but something about stepping through those empty rooms awakened a purpose she had buried under the weight of the Whitman family's expectations. But now that she had made that decision internally, she needed help. Not legal help, not emotional help. Architectural help. Someone who saw possibility where others saw luxury. Someone who understood transformation not as decoration but as intention. Someone who would listen to her vision without belittling it or twisting it into something more palatable for society's standards. She needed someone who could help her turn that cold estate into a haven. She needed someone different. Later that afternoon, as she sat at her kitchen table with her laptop open, she typed in a search query. Atlanta restoration architects specializing in community redevelopment. Dozens of names appeared. She skimmed through firm after firm, scrolling past glossy portfolios filled with high-rise offices and corporate designs. Beautiful work, but not the soul-deep transformation she needed. She paused when a particular name caught her eye. Cole Restoration and Design. Small firm, local roots, known for revitalizing old buildings in underserved neighborhoods, praised for blending history with community purpose. She clicked their website. Bold mission statement at the top. We don't just redesign spaces, we rebuild purpose. Her heart tugged. This was exactly the energy she needed. She scrolled through photos, renovated community centers, remodeled historic homes, urban gardens created from abandoned lots. The work felt grounded, authentic, meaningful. Her cursor hovered over the contact button. She inhaled, steadying herself. This wasn't just business. This was step one in reclaiming her life. She clicked. A form appeared. She filled it out quickly, describing the basics, a large estate, a desire to convert it into a community haven, interest in a consultation. When she finished typing, she took a breath and hit send. She didn't expect a response for at least a day. Firms were usually busy, and the holidays slowed things down. But 15 minutes later, her phone vibrated. A new email from Cole Restoration. Subject, consultation, urgent inquiry. Imani's pulse jumped lightly. She opened the message. Hello, Ms. Hale. I'm Damian Cole. I handle consultations personally. I received your inquiry and would love to discuss your project. The concept sounds powerful. If you're available, I can meet today or tomorrow. Today, tomorrow. Her breath softened. He wasn't pushing. He wasn't assuming. He wasn't grandstanding. Just offering. She typed back. Today works. 4 p.m.? Seconds later. Perfect. Sending location now. Looking forward to meeting you. Imani's stomach fluttered. Not romantic. Not yet. But with the nervous anticipation of starting something new. She glanced at the clock. 2:42 p.m. Just enough time to breathe, change clothes, and steady her thoughts. She went upstairs, changed into dark jeans, a fitted turtleneck, and boots. Comfortable, neat, confident. She pulled her hair into a soft puff, slid on a pair of earrings, grabbed her purse, and headed out. The location Damian sent was a converted warehouse in a revitalized part of Atlanta, an area filled with art studios, local cafes, and murals telling stories of resilience and history. It was only 20 minutes away. When she pulled up, the building looked simple on the outside. Matte black, brick, large windows, a wooden sign with the company's name burned into it. She stepped out of her car, took a breath, and walked toward the entrance. The door opened before she touched it. A tall man stepped forward. Imani Hale? His voice was warm, deep, and steady. Imani froze for half a second. Surprised. He was striking, not in an intimidating way, not in a flashy way, in a genuine, grounded way. He had warm brown skin, neatly trimmed facial hair, and thoughtful eyes that matched the calm in his voice. His sleeves were rolled up, revealing arms sculpted from actual work, not a gym photo shoot. He wore dark denim, boots, and a simple black shirt, clean, effortless, authentic. Yes, she replied softly. You must be Damian. He offered his hand. She accepted it. The handshake wasn't firm to prove anything, nor soft to patronize her. Just steady, balanced, respectful. He smiled. Thank you for coming on such short notice. I know it takes courage to jump into something new this quickly. Imani blinked. Courage, not impulse, not reaction, not emotion. Courage. She followed him inside. The interior of the warehouse was filled with sketches pinned to walls, pieces of reclaimed wood, stacked neatly, models of projects in progress, and a long wooden table covered in design prints. The air carried the faint scent of sawdust and warm paint, a creative, productive smell. Damian gestured toward a seat at the table. Have a seat. Would you like water, coffee? Water is fine. she replied, settling down. He returned with 2 bottles and set one in front of her. Then he sat across the table, leaning slightly forward, attentive, engaged. "So," he began gently, "tell me what inspired your message. You mentioned wanting to transform a large estate. That's significant." Imani inhaled deeply. This was it, the moment she vocalized the vision that had shaken her so deeply that morning. "I went back to the Whitman estate today," she said quietly. Damien's brows lifted slightly, not in gossiping curiosity, but in genuine interest. "It's where my husband's family lives," she continued. "Former husband. We're divorcing?" Damien nodded slowly, respectfully, waiting for her to share more if she wanted. Imani clasped her hands lightly. "I walked through the house room by room, and for the first time, I didn't feel small in it. I didn't feel like I didn't belong." Damien's gaze softened. "I saw a possibility," Imani said, voice steady. "I saw a place that could help people, women who feel trapped, women starting over, women who need a safe landing while they rebuild." Damien leaned back slightly, absorbing her words like someone listening to a friend share something precious. "I want to turn that house into a community space," she said. "A real one. Temporary housing, classes, therapy rooms, legal aid, a whole system of support." Damien let out a quiet breath. "Imani, that's powerful." She swallowed, emotion pricking the back of her eyes. "I don't want that house to represent the worst moment of my life," she whispered. "I want it to represent purpose." Damien nodded firmly. "I understand." "You do?" she asked, surprised. "Yes," he said simply. "Pain can either keep you stuck or push you towards something bigger. You chose bigger." Imani stared at him for a moment, unexpected warmth washing over her. He wasn't flattering her. He wasn't performing empathy. He simply understood. Damien reached for a sketch pad, flipping to a blank page. "Tell me everything you see in your mind," he said softly. "Every detail, every dream, nothing is too small." Imani hesitated, only for a second. Then the words poured out. She described the rooms, the hallways, the library, the potential bedrooms upstairs, the counseling spaces, the workshops, the community garden behind the house. As she spoke, Damien sketched quickly, clean lines, smooth motion, full focus. His eyes flicked up occasionally to study her expression before gliding back to the page. When she finished, she exhaled shakily. Damien turned the sketch around to show her. Imani's breath caught. He had captured it. The vision, the transformation, the rebirth. It wasn't perfect, just a quick draft, but it felt right. Imani leaned forward, hand lightly touching the edge of the paper. This is exactly what I saw." Damien smiled softly. "Then we'll make it real." Her chest warmed again. She wasn't used to being seen like this. Not by Preston, not by the Whitmans, not by people who only valued what she could offer them. Damien saw her purpose, her vision, her strength, without diminishing it, without fearing it, without twisting it. Her voice trembled slightly. "Thank you." He shook his head. "No, thank you. Projects like this matter. They change cities, not just buildings." She looked at him for a long moment, studying his sincerity, his presence, his calm. This was a man who listened, a man who didn't talk over her, a man who didn't shrink at her ambition, a man whose spirit felt steady enough to hold space for others. He tapped the sketch lightly. "We'll do this together if you want." Imani nodded slowly. "I want that." Their eyes met. The air shifted, not romantic yet, but charged with something new, something steady, something safe, something promising. Damien extended his hand again. "To new beginnings?" Imani placed her hand in his. "To new beginnings," she echoed, her voice soft but sure. And in that moment, in that simple, quiet handshake, the first spark of a new future ignited. For the next 2 days, the sketch Damien drew stayed on Imani's kitchen table like a living heartbeat. Every time she passed it, grabbing coffee, answering work emails, sitting to collect her thoughts, her eyes drifted toward the paper. She'd never thought of herself as a visionary. Determined. Yes. Focused, absolutely. A survivor, without question. But this idea of transforming a cold, beautiful mansion into a living sanctuary for women starting over felt like the most meaningful thing she had ever dared to imagine. On the morning they were scheduled to meet again, she dressed in a way that made her. Feel grounded, fitted black trousers, a simple cream blouse, and a navy blazer. Not to impress, but to feel aligned with her purpose. Before leaving, she stood in her living room for a moment, looking out the window at the street outside. Holiday decorations still shimmered along fences and porches. Life around her carried on, unaware of the earthquake that had shaken her days earlier. She inhaled deeply. Today wasn't about pain, or betrayal, or revenge. Today was about building. She grabbed her keys, her laptop, the sketch, and stepped outside. Damien's studio buzzed softly when she arrived. The sound of tools, quiet conversation, and distant music filled the air, a creative hum, alive and warm. She paused before stepping in, letting that energy settle into her spirit. He noticed her almost immediately and walked over with a smile that felt like a soft exhale against her anxieties. "Imani," he said, voice steady. "Good to see you." "Good to see you too," she replied, matching his calm tone. His presence had a grounding effect she couldn't fully explain. It felt safe. Not romantic yet, just safe, respectful, and steady, something she hadn't felt in years. They walked to the long wooden table at the center of the room, where Damien had cleared space and set up several large sheets of drafting paper, pencils, rulers, and a laptop. "I've been thinking about your project nonstop," he admitted with a small laugh. "My team too." "You have a team working already?" she asked, eyebrows raising. "Not officially. They just got excited about the concept. A lot of people want to be part of something meaningful." Imani's chest warmed. "So," Damien continued, gesturing to the table, "let's start turning your dream into something real." They sat side by side, and Damien slid a blank sheet toward her. "Talk to me," he said gently. "Walk me through everything you felt in that house." Imani hesitated, not out of fear, but out of awareness. She was used to presenting polished plans in conference rooms filled with executives. She wasn't used to speaking from her heart. But Damien waited patiently, giving her full permission to take her time. "Well," she began slowly, "when I walked through the estate, it didn't feel dead. I thought it would. I thought everything would feel tainted." Damien nodded quietly, listening. But instead, she continued, "It felt like the walls were waiting for something new, like they were tired of being a stage for a family built on expectations and appearances." Damien's pencil began to move across the page, light strokes, but purposeful. She kept speaking. "I saw rooms filled with people rebuilding. I saw young women learning skills, mothers finding safety. I saw hope moving through the hallways." Damien's pencil stilled. He turned the paper toward her. He had drawn a wide, open central hall filled with natural light, and instead of expensive furniture or sterile formality, he had sketched a warm gathering space with chairs, tables, soft lighting, and walls painted in inviting tones. Imani's breath caught. "Yes," she whispered. "That's exactly it." Damien smiled. "Good. Let's keep going." They spent the next hour mapping out ideas. The former formal dining room transformed into a workshop space for financial literacy classes, career counseling, and empowerment groups. The library, redesigned into a communal reading lounge and tutoring area, with shelves filled, not with old Whitman heirlooms, but with books chosen for growth, healing, and possibility. The upstairs guest rooms, reimagined as temporary housing suites for women escaping unsafe relationships or rebuilding from hardship. The backyard, a community garden, meditation space, and outdoor classroom. The old Whitman family office, converted into legal aid rooms staffed by volunteers from Imani's firm and other black women attorneys she planned to recruit. As she described each space, Damien helped refine the vision, adding details, adjusting layouts, noting structural limitations, and suggesting creative solutions. He didn't overshadow her ideas. He amplified them. Every time her voice softened with uncertainty, Damien steadied the vision with architectural expertise. Every time she stumbled on a detail, he helped shape it without taking it away from her. It was the kind of collaboration she always dreamed of with a partner but never received from Preston. Not once did Damien make her feel too ambitious. Not once did he imply she was overreaching. Not once did he shrink her ideas into something smaller. He took her dream seriously. That alone made her throat tighten. After 2 hours of intense planning, Damien suggested a break. He grabbed 2 cups of hot tea from a small corner station and handed one to her. She took it gratefully, warming her hands on the cup. "You okay?" he asked gently. Imani nodded. "Better than okay. This This feels right. Damien leaned against the table, arms crossed casually. You have a way of describing things that makes a project feel alive before it even exists. Imani blinked. You really think so? Yes, he said firmly. You're not building a center, you're building a story of healing. That's powerful. Her voice softened. I spent years trying to be what someone else wanted. This is the first thing that's mine. Damien's expression shifted, still calm, but deeper. Imani, he said quietly, the fact that you're creating something beautiful from something, that hurt you says more about your strength than anything you've ever achieved. The words hit her unexpectedly. Her breath faltered for a moment, just enough for Damien to notice. He stepped closer, not invading her space, but offering presence the way someone might offer a steady hand. You're not alone in this, he said. Not anymore. A warmth spread through her chest, not romantic, not yet, but grounding. Safe. Real. She nodded slowly. Thank you, she whispered. They returned to the table, and Damien unfurled a new sheet. Let's design the heart of the space, he said. Every building has one. What do you want the heart of Magnolia House to be? Imani bit her lip thoughtfully. A place where women feel seen, she said at last. Where they walk in and immediately feel like they belong. Damien scribbled. So a central lounge, with natural light, comfortable seating, warm colors, accessibility, a welcome desk staffed by people who care. Yes, she said, eyes brightening, a space where no woman feels judged, where no one feels like they have to earn respect. He looked up at her. A space opposite of the Whitman estate. Imani's breath hitched. Exactly, she whispered. They worked until the late afternoon light began to fade. The sketches multiplied, dozens of them, each more detailed than the last. By the time they wrapped up, a full preliminary blueprint stretched across the table. Imani stared at it, overwhelmed in the best way possible. It's beautiful, she murmured. Damien smiled softly. It's your idea. I'm just helping shape it. Their eyes met. A quiet understanding passed between them. Not flirtation, not tension, recognition. Of two people who had survived in different ways. Of two people choosing growth. Of two people building something bigger than themselves. Damien rolled up the blueprint and handed it to her. This is just the beginning, he said. We'll write the next chapter together. Imani took the blueprint, her hand brushing gently against his. Together, she echoed. She walked toward the exit, blueprint tucked under her arm. Before leaving, she turned back toward him. Damien? Yes. I'm glad I emailed you, she said quietly. He smiled, a warm, soft smile that reached his eyes. I'm glad you did too. Imani stepped outside into the cool air, exhaling deeply. She wasn't rebuilding alone. She wasn't planning alone. She wasn't healing alone. A new story had begun, and its foundation was stronger than anything the Whitmans had ever built. The next morning, Imani woke up with a renewed sense of drive. Her blueprint from Damien rested on her nightstand, neatly rolled, tied with a ribbon he added before handing it to her, saying, Every big dream deserves a beautiful beginning. She had stared at it for nearly 10 minutes before going to sleep, not because of the design alone, though it was stunning, but because of what it represented. A new future, a new foundation, a new purpose. She slipped out of bed, stretched, tied her hair back, and made her way to the kitchen for coffee. The morning sun caught the edges of the blueprint tube, making it glow softly. A surge of determination washed over her. Today was the day she would begin the official process of acquiring the Whitman estate. She placed her coffee mug down, opened her laptop, and dialed the number of a highly regarded luxury real estate agent she had worked with on several legal contracts over the years, a sharp black woman named Vera Langston. Known for handling complicated property disputes without flinching. It took only 2 rings before Vera picked up. Imani Hale? Girl, it's been a minute. Imani smiled softly. It has. I need your help with something important. Talk to me, Vera said, voice crisp and efficient. I want to buy an estate, Imani said, walking toward the window. A large one. It belongs to the Whitman family. There was a pause on the line, not hesitation but recognition. Their estate? Vera repeated slowly. Yes. Imani, Vera said with a deeper tone now. I'm going to be honest. That house is one of the most difficult properties in the region to even negotiate. They don't sell outside the family, ever. Imani's gaze hardened. That's why I need you. Vera exhaled once. All right, I'm coming to your place. 30 minutes. The call ended. Imani felt a small knot of nerves twist in her stomach, not fear, but anticipation. She grabbed a pen and notebook and began writing ideas quickly. Potential. Funding, zoning questions, legal strategies, community partnerships. By the time the knock on her door came, she had multiple pages filled. Vera stepped inside wearing a tailored navy suit and heels sharp enough to cut glass. She held a leather folder under one arm and took one look at Imani before saying, "Okay, what happened? You look like someone who woke up ready to fight an entire dynasty." Imani laughed under her breath. Something like that. "Come in." They sat at the dining table. Imani laid out the blueprint Damien made, her notes, and the list of the estate's basic details. Vera skimmed through the papers, eyebrows lifting slightly. "You've done your homework." "I've done more than that," Imani said softly. "I've found my purpose." Vera's expression shifted, less business, more respect. "Tell me what this house means to you," Vera said. Imani explained everything, the visit, the empty halls, the vision, the way she saw each room becoming something new. She didn't mention the personal betrayal, not because she wanted to hide it, but because the purpose stood on its own. When she finished, Vera leaned back. "This is bold," she admitted. "But you've always been bold. I like this project." Imani exhaled in relief. "So, you'll help me?" "Honey," Vera said, leaning forward with a grin. "I'll help you buy that house, even if the Whitmans scream at the county courthouse." Imani laughed, a real laugh, surprised and warm. "But," Vera added, her voice sharpening, "there's something you need to know." Imani straightened slightly. "The patriarch passed years ago," Vera explained. "The deed transferred fully to Elizabeth after the trust split, which means she has complete authority over the estate." Imani's jaw tightened. Of course Elizabeth held the reins. "Do you still want to do this?" Vera asked, watching her carefully. "Yes," Imani said without hesitation. Vera nodded, satisfied. "Then let's get to work." By noon, Vera had drafted a formal inquiry letter and submitted it to the Whitman family's brokerage. The response came faster than either expected. A phone call. From Elizabeth. Vera's eyes widened when she saw the caller ID. Oh, she's calling directly. Bold move. She put the call on speaker. Elizabeth's voice spilled through the phone, polished, firm, cold. "Ms. Langston, I received your inquiry. There must be some misunderstanding. Our estate is not on the market," Vera replied calmly. "We are aware. My client is willing to make an exceptional private offer." Elizabeth scoffed. A short, sharp sound. "And who is this client?" Before Vera answered, Imani spoke. "Me." There was absolute silence on the other end. Then, "You?" Elizabeth hissed. "You want to buy my home?" Imani's tone stayed calm. "Yes." "For a community project." "A project?" Elizabeth snapped. "Or some attempt at revenge because my son moved on?" Vera's eyebrows lifted slightly, but Imani remained steady. "This isn't about your son," she said. "Or you. It's about purpose." Elizabeth's breath hitched. Stunned or furious, Imani couldn't tell. "You are out of your mind," Elizabeth finally snapped. "You will never own my family estate. Never. I'll die before I sign anything over to you." "Then you should prepare yourself," Imani said, voice steady as stone, "because I'm not walking away." Elizabeth inhaled sharply and hung up. Vera sat back slowly. "Well, that went exactly how I expected." Imani placed her hands flat on the table. "She'll fight us." "Oh, absolutely," Vera said, but she underestimated the wrong woman. 2 hours later, Imani met Damien again, this time at a cafe near his studio. She explained everything, from Vera's call to Elizabeth's reaction. Damien leaned forward, studying her expression. "How are you feeling?" Imani looked down at her tea for a moment. "Focused. That's not what I asked," he said gently. She swallowed. "I'm a little shaken, but determined." Damien nodded. "Good. Determination is the real fuel behind projects like this. Now tell me something. Do you know why Elizabeth is reacting like this?" "Because she hates me," Imani said plainly. Damien shook his head. "Partly, but also because the estate is her identity. Families like that cling to symbols. They don't let go easily." Imani sighed. "So what do I do?" Fight bigger, he said simply. Not nastier, bigger. She blinked. What does that mean? Damien reached for a napkin and drew a simple diagram. You need allies, he said. You need a team who believes in your mission. People who help fund it, support it, advocate for it. Because one woman, no matter how brilliant, shouldn't battle a legacy alone. Imani stared at him, absorbing his words. Vera handles real estate, Damien continued. I handle design. But you need financial backers, city connections, community partners, local leaders, people who see this center as a gift to Atlanta. Imani felt her confidence build again. Start with 3, Damien said. That's all you need at first. She nodded slowly. And I'll help you recruit them, he added softly. Imani's gaze lifted. Why? Because this matters, he said simply. You matter. And there it was, that steady warmth in her chest again. A feeling she hadn't felt from Preston in years. Being seen, being respected, being supported. That evening, Imani sat at her dining table with her laptop, her notebook, and a fresh determination. She made a list of potential allies. 1. A financial partner, someone who invests not for profit, but for impact. She thought of Dr. Renee Barker, a philanthropist who donated regularly to women's causes. 2. A community advocate, someone connected to grassroots organizations. She considered Aunt Yvonne, a respected social worker who led multiple outreach programs. 3. A business strategist, someone who knew how to pitch to city officials, navigate zoning laws, and build community programs. She scribbled down the name Carlos Bennett, a consultant they hired at her law firm for large initiatives. Imani sat back, staring at the list. For the first time in days, she felt genuinely excited, not about escaping her past, but about building her future. She texted them one by one. Can we talk tomorrow? I'm working on something important. Each replied within minutes. Absolutely. Of course. Name the time. She felt her heart warm with gratitude. This was happening. She wasn't alone. Not anymore. 2 hours later, as she curled up with a blanket on her couch to unwind, her phone buzzed with a notification. A news alert. She frowned, and when she clicked it, her blood chilled for a moment. There was no name attached, no details, but everyone would know. Elizabeth had already started her war. Imani set the phone down calmly. She wasn't afraid. Damien's voice echoed in her mind. Fight bigger. She stood up, walked to her kitchen table, unrolled the blueprint, and placed her hand on it. This house is going to change lives, she whispered. No matter what she does. The morning of the 3rd day came with a quiet determination humming beneath Imani's skin. She woke earlier than usual, her spirit alert, her mind sharp. The tension from yesterday's news leak was still present, but it no longer felt like fear. It felt like fuel. She showered, dressed in a crisp black suit, and clasped a pair of subtle gold earrings her grandmother had given her years ago, earrings she wore only when she needed to channel strength. Today was one of those days. She grabbed her notebook, her laptop, and Damien's rolled blueprint, then headed out to meet Vera at her downtown office. The January cold brushed against her face, but she didn't flinch. She felt clear, firm, ready. Vera's office was on the 16th floor of a glass tower overlooking the city. When Imani entered, she found Vera already standing by the window with her, phone pressed to her ear, and a look that said she was in full battle mode. No, you listen to me, Vera snapped. If the Whitmans try blocking inquiries again, I'll escalate this to the county for interference. Don't test me. She hung up, exhaling forcefully, then turned toward Imani. Morning, Vera said. You ready? Imani sat down across from her. Tell me everything. Vera nodded and opened a folder thick with documents. First things first, she said, flipping through the pages. Your offer is strong, stronger than anything Elizabeth expects. She still thinks this is personal revenge, but I've presented it as a community investment initiative. Good, Imani murmured. This project is bigger than her. Oh, she'll learn that, Vera said. But here's the problem. She refused the first offer. Imani nodded calmly. I expected that. She refused the second too, Vera added. But here's the part she didn't expect. Vera tapped a page inside the folder. You see this? Imani leaned forward. It was county tax documentation, a list of overdue property maintenance fees, legal repairs the Whitman family had postponed, and pending environmental code requirements for the estate grounds. Imani stared. She didn't pay the fees? Nope, not one in the last 3 years, Vera said. I ran this check last night. She's been ignoring county notices, which means the house is still grand on the outside, but inside, it's slowly falling apart. Imani blinked. So what does that mean? Vera smirked. It means leverage. She slid another document forward. I filed a formal inquiry with the county about potential acquisition for community benefit. Once the county realized you could restore the estate and bring it up to code, they became much more interested. Imani's heart thudded. And Elizabeth can't ignore the county, Vera said, leaning back. Not unless she wants citations. Imani slowly exhaled, feeling the momentum shift. What happens next? She asked. We make another offer, Vera said, but this time, the county supports it. Imani nodded, a slow smile spreading across her face. Then let's make it. The confrontation came faster than expected. 3 hours later, Vera and Imani sat in a quiet conference room when the door burst open. Elizabeth strode inside like a storm wrapped in a fur coat, her posture rigid, her eyes sharp, her mouth tight with fury. Imani, she said, voice dripping with disdain, you have crossed a line. Vera didn't stand. She simply folded her hands calmly. Mrs. Whitman, she said, you should have scheduled an appointment. Elizabeth ignored her, focusing entirely on Imani. You think you can manipulate the county into forcing me to sell my home? Not manipulate, Imani replied calmly. Present the truth. You've neglected the estate. Elizabeth's cheek twitched. You're trying to take my family's legacy. Your legacy is built on exclusion, Imani said softly. My project is built on healing. The room went still. Elizabeth glared. You think you can turn that estate into some shelter? A resource center, Imani corrected. A place for women who need support. Elizabeth scoffed. This is petty revenge. This is purpose, Imani replied. Vera slid a document across the table. Mrs. Whitman, the county has reviewed the proposal and agrees the estate would be better served under new ownership. They will not interfere with the sale. In fact, they are willing to support renovations for community use. Elizabeth's face blanched. No, she whispered. No, I won't sign anything. Then the county will open a compliance investigation, Vera said flatly. You could be fined heavily for negligence. Elizabeth's eyes widened. And if it escalates, Vera continued, they may put a lien on the property. The blow landed. Hard. Elizabeth looked at Imani with a kind of anguish that wasn't sadness, but realization. Realization that she had lost. Imani stood. This doesn't have to be a fight, she said gently. You can sign willingly or the county can deal with it. Either way, I'm taking the estate. And I'm going to turn it into something meaningful. Elizabeth took a shaky breath. Her voice broke with disbelief. You're really doing this? I am. Elizabeth closed her eyes for a moment, gathering what dignity she had left, then looked at Vera. Fine, she whispered. Prepare the papers. The signing took place the next morning in a small private office inside the county courthouse. A clerk sat between them with the official deed, a notary stamp, and a stack of transfer forms. Vera sat beside Imani, calm and confident. Elizabeth sat across the table, hands trembling slightly as she picked up the pen. This house was my husband's pride, she said bitterly. You'll never understand its value. I understand its potential, Imani replied softly. I always have. Elizabeth glared, then scribbled her signature with a jagged stroke. The clerk stamped the document. The sound echoed in the room, a sound that changed everything. The clerk looked up at Imani with a small smile. Congratulations. The estate is yours. Imani exhaled slowly, not triumphantly, not dramatically, but with the deep release of a woman reclaiming her power. Elizabeth stood abruptly. You may own the walls, she spat, but you'll never erase what my family built. Imani held her gaze. I'm not trying to erase anything. I'm building something new. Elizabeth left without another word. Vera smiled proudly. You did it. Imani closed her eyes briefly. Yes, she did. Later that afternoon, Imani drove to the estate. This time not as a guest, not as an outsider, not as a woman begging for a place she never received. She drove as the owner. The gates opened automatically when she entered the code Vera had secured for her. As she pulled into the driveway, her heart swelled with something new. Peace, strength, possibility. She stepped out of her car and walked slowly toward the massive front door. She placed her hand on the banister of the front steps. She remembered gripping that railing when she overheard Preston's betrayal. She remembered her shaking breath, her collapsing world, her tears. Now she gripped it again, firmly, confidently. She walked inside. The foyer was quiet, bathed in soft winter light. She stood at the base of the staircase, looking up. 2 days ago, she fled this hallway shattered. Today, she stood rooted in her purpose. She walked into the family parlor, the room where Preston and Elizabeth whispered lies behind her back. She opened the curtains wide, letting sunlight flood the space. The brightness washed away the heaviness that room once held. She whispered to the empty air, "This is my house now." She continued walking, room by room, touching walls, opening doors, imagining every space transformed. Here, a training workshop. There, a counseling room. Upstairs, safe bedrooms for women rebuilding their lives. When she reached the former Whitman dining room, she stopped in the center of it and closed her eyes. "I choose healing," she whispered. "I choose growth. I choose new beginnings." She placed her hand on her chest. "And I choose me." The estate felt different already, less haunted by the past, more open to the future. Imani took one last slow look around the room, her expression softening with pride. This was the first day of her new life. This was the final closure she needed. This was the moment she transformed pain into power. Tomorrow, she would call Damien. Tomorrow, they would begin the renovation plan officially. Tomorrow, Magnolia House would take its first step toward becoming a reality. But today, she celebrated quietly. Today she stood in the mansion she once entered in fear, as a woman who had reclaimed her name, her purpose, and her freedom. 3 days after officially signing for the Whitman estate, Imani stood in the vast driveway with her arms folded, breathing in the cold morning air. The mansion loomed behind her, once a symbol of emotional suffocation, now a blank canvas ready for transformation. Construction trucks lined the driveway. Workers unloaded equipment. Architectural plans fanned out across folding tables. Clipboards passed from hand to hand with intensity and direction. Imani watched all of it with a quiet, determined pride. This place was changing, finally changing, and she was the one leading that transformation. A voice approached behind her. "You look like someone who's already seeing the future." She turned. Damien walked toward her wearing worn jeans, a dark hoodie under a thick work jacket, and construction boots. A rolled set of blueprints was tucked under his arm, and his warm smile caught the morning light. Imani felt a small flutter inside her chest, not romantic yet, just comfort. "Good morning," she said, smiling back. "Morning," Damien replied. "Hope you ate breakfast. Today is going to be a long one." Imani exhaled softly. "I'm ready." He studied her for a moment, eyes steady with admiration. "You always are." Heat warmed her cheeks, but she pushed it aside and nodded toward the entrance. "Let's get inside." They walked together through the front door, stepping into the foyer where workers had already begun carefully removing old Whitman family portraits. Ladders stood in the hallway, protective sheets covered the floors, and every corner echoed with purposeful noise. Imani took it all in, the movement, the energy, the momentum. She felt alive. "All right," Damien said, unrolling the blueprints on a long work table near the staircase. "We have 3 priorities today: structural assessment, layout planning, and budget alignment." "Sounds straightforward," Imani replied. He raised an eyebrow. "It's everything but straightforward." Imani laughed softly. "Then we'll figure it out." Damien smirked. "I like your confidence." They stood shoulder to shoulder as he pointed out areas that required attention. "This wing needs reinforcement," he explained. "Years of neglect caused foundational weaknesses." She frowned. "Elizabeth never took care of it?" "No. You can tell by the moisture damage. This place looks perfect on the surface but has hidden issues, like its former owners," Imani murmured under her breath. Damien chuckled, but softly, respectful of the pain behind her comment. He moved to the next section of the blueprint. "The upstairs bedrooms you want to convert into residential suites will need new wiring, plumbing upgrades, and safety installations." "I expected that," she said. "I know," he replied. "You're always 10 steps ahead." His words held a subtle note of admiration that again warmed her chest. They spent the next 2 hours walking from room to room. The workers paused occasionally to greet Imani respectfully. Some recognized her from the news, but not because of the divorce scandal, because she was a respected attorney in Atlanta's legal community. One worker, a Latina woman named Marisol, smiled brightly at her. "I heard about the project. Bless you for doing this," she said. Imani's heart tightened with emotion. "Thank you. This place is going to change lives," Marisol added before returning to her work. Imani's throat warmed at the sincerity. Damien observed the exchange quietly. Once they reached the former Whitman dining room, soon to become a workshop space, he said softly, "You inspire people more than you realize." Imani blinked. "I'm not trying to inspire anyone." "I know," he said. "That's why it works." For a second, they simply stood there, exchanging a look that lingered longer than either expected. Then Damien cleared his throat, refocusing on the blueprint. "We should check the south wing. Lead the way," she said. The south wing was colder than the rest of the house, with drafty windows and peeling wallpaper. Imani wrapped her arms around herself as they stepped inside. This was rarely used, Damien explained. Probably only opened during holidays. Imani nodded, the memories tugging at her. Elizabeth dismissing her ideas for the space. Preston ignoring her excitement about decorating. Staff walking around her as if she didn't exist. But as they inspected each room, those painful memories slowly dissolved into a new narrative. "This area would be perfect for therapy rooms," she said quietly. "Private, quiet, healing." Damien nodded, taking notes. "I agree. Plenty of natural light, too." They entered a narrow hallway that led to a back office, one she remembered vividly. "This room," Imani said, voice low. "This used to be Elizabeth's private study." Damien's eyebrows lifted. "Should we skip it?" "No," Imani said firmly. "We reclaim it." She stepped inside. The walls still carried the faint scent of Elizabeth's perfume. The shelves were empty now, but the energy of past judgment still lingered. Imani walked straight to the center of the room and stood tall. "This will be the intake room," she said. "The first step for any woman who walks in. A welcoming, warm, empowering space." Damien's eyes softened. "You really are rebuilding your story here." She turned toward him. "Not just mine. Dozens of others." He smiled, not flirtatious, not superficial, just proud. "Let's take measurements," he said. They worked side by side, Damien holding the measuring tape while Imani scribbled notes. Sometimes their hands brushed accidentally, just slight touches that lingered a millisecond too long. Neither of them commented on it, but each time, a spark nudged the air between them. By noon, the crew took a lunch break. Damien and Imani stepped outside to chat privately by the garden area, where winter leaves scattered across patches of frozen ground. Damien handed her a sandwich he grabbed for her earlier. "You need to eat." Imani laughed softly. "Are you my architect or my nutrition coach?" "Both," he said with a grin. "I multitask." They sat on a low stone bench, overlooking the empty lawn that would eventually become a community garden. For a few minutes they simply ate in silence. It wasn't awkward. It was peaceful, a rare kind of quiet that didn't demand anything. "A lot of this feels surreal," Imani admitted softly. Damien turned toward her. "Which part?" "All of it." She looked out at the field. "Leaving the marriage, buying this estate, standing here with plans to turn it into something meaningful. It feels huge." "It is huge," Damien said gently, "and you're handling it with strength." "Most people never learn." Imani glanced at him. "I don't always feel strong." "You don't have to feel it," he replied. "You already are." Those words hit somewhere deep, a tender place she didn't know still needed recognition. Her eyes softened. "Thank you." "Any time," he said, voice quiet and sincere. Another pause. Wind whispered through the trees. To her surprise, Damien reached out and brushed a piece of lint from her shoulder, a simple gesture, gentle and thoughtful. She froze for a moment, breath catching unexpectedly. He pulled his hand back slowly. "Probably drywall dust," he murmured, but both of them felt the shift. Soft, subtle, but unmistakable. A new connection forming, still fragile, still undefined, but undeniably there. Imani looked down at her hands, steadying her breath. She wasn't ready for romance. Not yet. But she also wasn't afraid of it anymore. She was healing. And healing had room for new beginnings. Inside, the crew resumed activity. Damien led Imani to the upper level of the house to assess the future residential suites. The hallways echoed with their footsteps as they visited each room, checking structural conditions, measuring spaces, noting possibilities. This room, Damien said, opening a door, would make a great small apartment for a single mother. Imani stepped inside, imagining it. A kitchenette, a reading corner, soft lighting. Yes, Damien agreed. Warm colors, safe energy. They walked to the window and looked outside. Snowflakes began to fall gently, soft, slow, drifting across the estate. Imani inhaled deeply. When I lived here, she said quietly, snow always felt isolating, like the house swallowed the noise. Damien turned fully toward her. How does it feel now? She looked at the falling snow again. Like a reset, she whispered. Damien smiled. Exactly. For a long moment, they simply stood by the window, the soft snowfall reflecting. Off the glass, the room filled with light, everything quiet and still. Something warm and calm settled between them. Not intensity, not passion, not rush. Recognition, safety, beginning. The rest of the afternoon passed in steady rhythm. They created detailed measurements. Damien drafted updated sketches. Workers checked in with questions. Imani offered direction with confidence she didn't know she had. She was in her element, not as a wife, not as a broken heart, not as someone defined by the Whitmans, but as a leader, a builder, a woman reclaiming her story. By evening, most of the crew had left. Imani and Damien remained downstairs in the foyer, reviewing notes and discussing next steps. When they finished, Damien rolled up the new sketches and handed them to her. You did great today, he said. So did you, she replied. He hesitated just a moment, then added softly, I'm proud of you. Imani's breath caught. She swallowed carefully, absorbing the weight of those words. Coming from anyone else, they might have sounded polite. Coming from him, they felt real. Her gaze met his. Thank you, she whispered. The air between them hummed, gentle, warm, undeniable. He stepped back slightly, giving her space, not pushing anything. I'll see you tomorrow, he said. Yes, she replied. Tomorrow. She watched him walk out toward his truck, the last traces of daylight catching the back of his jacket. When his taillights disappeared down the driveway, she turned back toward the mansion. Her mansion, the place that once witnessed her heartbreak, was now witnessing her rebirth. She exhaled slowly, a soft smile forming on her lips. Tomorrow, she would continue rebuilding. Tomorrow, she would continue rising. Tomorrow, she would continue stepping into a future she chose, a future she deserved. The next morning came with a cold breeze and a sky washed in muted gray. Imani arrived at the estate, bundled in a warm coat, feeling both refreshed and nervous as she stepped onto the familiar stones of the driveway. Workers were already scattered across the property, carrying materials, hauling tools, and calling instructions to each other. The noise didn't overwhelm her. In fact, it felt like music, the beginning of a transformation she once thought she would never have the courage to pursue. Imani tucked her hands into her coat pockets as she walked toward the front door. Inside the foyer, she found Damien standing on a ladder, measuring the upper trim above the entryway. His sleeves were rolled up, revealing toned forearms dusted lightly with plaster. A pencil was tucked behind his ear as he scribbled notes on a clipboard perched on a step above him. He looked focused, confident, effortlessly grounded. Something inside Imani fluttered, soft, unfamiliar. He glanced down just long enough to notice her. Morning, he said, voice warm. Morning, she replied. You're early. Couldn't sleep, he admitted with a small smile. Too many ideas in my head. She stepped closer. About the project? About you trusting me with it, he clarified gently. Her heart gave one unsteady thump. Imani cleared her throat lightly. Well, I'm glad you're here. He held her gaze for a moment that lingered just long enough to create a gentle tension in the air before climbing one step higher. Oh, he added casually, the painter left the replacement bulbs up here. Could you pass them to me? Imani walked over to a small box resting on a nearby table. She picked it up and moved toward the ladder. Careful, she said. Those old fixtures might be unstable. Damien chuckled. I've handled worse projects. He reached out and took one of the bulbs from her hand, their fingers brushing faintly. She felt the warmth of his skin, brief, but enough to make her breath pause. He looked down at her again, expression soft. "You okay?" he asked quietly. Imani nodded. "Just tired. Long week." He frowned sympathetically. "You've been carrying a lot?" She smiled gently. "I'm managing." "No," he said, his tone respectful but firm. "You're doing more than managing. You're rebuilding your life and an entire estate, all at once." She stared at him for a second too long. "I hope you know how strong that is," he added softly. Her throat tightened. "Thank you." Damien returned to his task, shifting slightly on the ladder. Imani watched him, then glanced toward the living room doorway. Several workers were discussing insulation issues, and she knew she needed to check the layout plans for the residential suites upstairs. Before she stepped away, she looked back at Damien. "Want me to hold the ladder for you?" she asked. His lips curved into a grateful smile. "I'd appreciate that." She walked closer, placing both hands on the sides of the ladder to steady it. Damien adjusted his position, reaching upward to remove the old bulb from its socket. Everything seemed stable until Imani froze. Damien stiffened. The wood beneath the top rung creaked sharply, too sharply, before splintering suddenly. "Damien," she gasped. He slipped. His foot lost traction. His weight shifted. The ladder pitched slightly off balance. Instinct took over. Imani lunged forward, gripping the ladder harder, pulling it toward her to stop it from tipping backward. But the sudden movement only worsened the angle. Damien's hand grabbed nothing but air. Imani's heart slammed into her chest. "No," she cried. Gravity yanked him downward. But before his body could fall completely, Imani moved with a burst of strength she didn't think she had. He dropped toward her, and she caught him, not perfectly, not smoothly, but enough. Enough that he didn't hit the ground, enough that his arms instinctively wrapped around her, enough that his chest collided with hers, enough that she stumbled backward with the weight but didn't fall. They stood there, breathless, tangled, holding onto each other like the world had paused. Damien's face pressed near her temple for a split second before he pulled back just enough to look at her. His breath trembled against her cheek. Imani stared up at him, her hands still gripping his arms. He whispered, "You just saved me." Her pulse hammered wildly. "You scared me." They were too close, too vulnerable, too aware of the other's heartbeat. Damien didn't try to step away immediately. Neither did she. His fingertips brushed her waist lightly, hesitant at first, then steadier, as if making sure she was truly okay. "Are you hurt?" he asked, searching her face. "No," she breathed. "Are you?" "Not even a little," he said, voice low. "You broke my fall like a shield." She laughed, breathless, shaky, overwhelmed. "I wasn't thinking. I just reacted." "I'm glad you did," he murmured. He still hadn't moved. She still hadn't moved. Time suspended between them, quiet, charged. In the soft light filtering from the foyer windows, his eyes studied hers with an intensity she hadn't experienced in years. Not the controlling kind, not the dismissive kind, the appreciative kind, the respectful kind, the kind that saw her. Imani swallowed slowly. "You really should be more careful. You really should let someone else climb ladders around here," he countered gently. She smiled, small, soft, full of something new. His hand brushed her cheek. It was the lightest touch, but it sent a warm current through her entire chest. "Imani," he whispered. Her breath caught. She didn't step back. He didn't either. His thumb traced a barely there line near the edge of her jaw, and she leaned into it without thinking. He froze, not out of hesitation, but as if deeply affected by the simple closeness. She met his gaze. "Damien." He moved slowly, watching her, giving her time to lean in or step away, time to choose or retreat. Imani didn't retreat. She lifted her face slightly. He closed the remaining distance, gently, carefully, and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss wasn't rushed, or hungry, or demanding. It was warm, soft, tender, meaningful, the kind that breathed new life into places she thought were long empty. Imani responded hesitantly at first, not from fear, but from surprise. But as Damien deepened the kiss just slightly, she felt something inside her unfold. A quiet ache she hadn't acknowledged, a longing she had buried, a relief she didn't expect. His hand cupped the side of her face gently, anchoring her in the moment. Her fingers curled into his jacket instinctively. Time held still. When they finally broke apart, Damien rested his forehead against hers, breathing softly. "I'm sorry," he murmured, though his voice didn't sound regretful. "I didn't mean to cross a line." "You didn't," she whispered. Her cheeks flushed. She stepped back only enough to breathe freely, but her chest still fluttered with a warm, unsteady rhythm. Damien's eyes softened further. "You sure you're okay?" Imani nodded. "Yes. Better than okay." He smiled, a slow, genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Good," he whispered. For a few quiet seconds they just stood there, absorbing what had happened. Then Damien cleared his throat, rubbing the back of his neck, grounding himself. "I should, find a safer ladder," he said. Imani laughed, a light, genuine laugh she didn't know she needed. "That would be ideal," she said. Damien looked at her again, this time with a softness she recognized as something new forming between them. Something quiet but powerful, and something she wasn't afraid of. For the rest of the day, things felt different, not awkward, not rushed. Just open. Every time she and Damien exchanged glances, there was a warmth that hadn't been there before. A quiet understanding, a connection deepening with every shared look and half-smile. Workers noticed the subtle energy but said nothing. Imani walked with renewed confidence. Damien worked with renewed focus, and the estate, now hers, buzzed with the promise of transformation. By late afternoon, Imani stepped into what used to be the Whitmans' formal library. The sun slanted through the dusty windows, casting soft light over empty shelves. She ran her fingers along the wood, imagining what the room would soon hold. Books chosen for healing, resources for empowerment, mentors sitting with young women rebuilding from hardship. She heard footsteps behind her. Damien stopped at the doorway, leaning lightly against the frame. "You okay?" he asked quietly. Imani turned, smiling. "Yes." He took a few steps toward her. "I keep thinking about earlier." Her heart fluttered. "Me too." He paused, hands in his pockets. "I don't want to rush anything. I know you're healing. I know this is all new for you, so I'll follow your pace." That simple respect made her chest warm. "Thank you," she whispered. Damien nodded once. "Whatever pace feels right for you. I'm here." For the first time since the Whitman betrayal, she felt something that surprised her. Not fear, not hesitation, not doubt. Hope, genuine, warm, fragile hope. That evening, when she finally left the estate and drove home under the soft glow of winter's streetlights, she felt something she hadn't felt in a very long time. Alive, not because of the kiss, because she was building something new, something strong, something meaningful. And for the first time since her world fell apart, she wasn't building alone. The morning after the latter moment, Imani woke with a flutter of uncertainty in her chest, but it wasn't fear. It was something gentler, something warm, something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. She stretched beneath the covers, sunlight filtering through her blinds. For a moment, she allowed herself to replay the softness of Damien's touch, the careful way he kissed her, the way he made sure she didn't feel rushed or overwhelmed. But then her phone vibrated. Not once, not twice, but continuously. Imani closed her eyes. Peace. Interrupted. She reached over and flipped the phone face up. The screen flashed with messages. 32 missed calls. 17 texts. Notifications from social media. A news alert. 2 emails from her firm's PR department. Her stomach tightened. Whatever happened while she slept, it wasn't small. She tapped the news alert first. Whitman family breaks silence. Imani is destroying our legacy. Another headline below it. Community turns former society wife into controversial figure after shocking estate purchase. Her jaw clenched. She clicked the first article. A journalist quoted an anonymous family source saying, "She blindsided Preston. She manipulated the county. She's using the estate to embarrass the family that embraced her." Imani shut the phone off immediately. Her chest tightened, not because she believed anything written, but because she recognized Elizabeth's voice behind every word. She stood slowly and walked to the bathroom mirror. Her face was calm, but her eyes carried the weight of the headline. She straightened her posture and whispered, "You don't shrink anymore." Imani arrived on site around 9 a.m., entering the estate with her shoulders square and her chin held high. Workers rushed around carrying beams and equipment, and the sound of drills filled the air. But something felt off. People were whispering more than usual. Conversations quieted whenever she approached. A few workers looked at her with sympathy, the kind that meant they had seen the news. Damien noticed the shift instantly. He walked toward her, holding a clipboard, but dropping it onto a table when he saw the look in her eyes. "What happened?" he asked, tone low and protective. She hesitated, searching for steadiness. Elizabeth leaked something to the press. Damien's jaw tightened. "Of course she did." Imani inhaled. "I woke up to headlines calling me manipulative, saying I'm trying to ruin their legacy." Damien stepped closer, studying her expression. "Are you okay?" "I'm processing." "Sit," he said gently. She did. He crouched beside her, not towering over her, not crowding her, just close enough to be a grounding presence. "Imani," he said softly, "you knew they would fight back. People like the Whitmans don't understand losing gracefully." "I didn't want this," she whispered. "I didn't want attention. I didn't want drama. And you didn't start it," he replied. "You responded. You protected yourself. You built something better. They're reacting to their own guilt." Imani closed her eyes for a moment. "It still hurts." "I know," Damien said, "but you're not in this alone." His thumb brushed gently over her knuckles, a small, steady reminder that she wasn't facing this storm by herself. She exhaled slowly and nodded. "Thank you." "Always," he murmured. They stood together to rejoin the workers. "Team meeting," Damien called out. Everyone gathered near the foyer, holding coffee cups, clipboards, and tools. Damien stood beside Imani, not speaking for her but with her. "Some of you may have seen headlines this morning," Damien began. "Let's make one thing clear. This project doesn't stop. This mission doesn't change." A few workers nodded. "This estate will become a safe place," he continued. "A community space. A new beginning for people who need it." Imani stepped forward, voice firm but warm. "I know the noise outside is loud," she said. "I know you hear things, see things, read things, but I want you to know this. I'm committed to this project. I'm committed to all of you. And I will not let anyone tear down what we're building." A hum of agreement spread across the group. "Let's get back to work," Damien said. Workers dispersed, energy shifting from tense to focused. Imani turned to Damien. "Thank you." He shook his head. "You didn't need help. I just amplified your voice." She smiled faintly. "It felt good having you there." His expression softened, but he didn't push the moment further. "Ready for the second floor assessment?" "Yes," she said. "Let's go." While she walked the renovated hallways with Damien, an entirely different storm brewed 40 minutes away. Preston stood inside his condo, staring at the television screen as the news blared headlines he never expected. Imani Hale acquires Whitman estate. Sources claim Preston blindsided by divorce. Whitman family under scrutiny for neglecting historic property. Every headline felt like a slap. "This is your fault," Elizabeth hissed over the phone. "You let her slip away. You humiliated this family." "Mother, stop," Preston said, rubbing his temples. "This isn't helping. How could you let her dominate the narrative?" Elizabeth demanded. "You should have kept her quiet." "She left me," Preston snapped. "She didn't even give me a chance." "Do not play the victim," Elizabeth snarled. "You ruined that marriage by indulging that assistant." Preston shut his eyes. "I didn't sleep with Claire," he said quietly, a truth he held but hadn't revealed fully yet. Elizabeth scoffed. "Irrelevant. The world thinks you did, and now she owns our estate. Fix it." Preston hung up before saying something he couldn't take back. He sank onto the couch, running both hands through his hair. Regret, confusion, and humiliation clawed at him. He whispered to himself, "How did this happen so fast?" He grabbed his keys. He was going to the estate. Imani and Damien walked through the old guest wing, discussing the placement of the counseling rooms, when one of the workers rushed toward them. "Miss Hale, someone's at the front gate asking for you." Imani frowned. "Who?" The worker hesitated. "Your ex-husband." A cold shock ran through her. She felt Damien tense beside her. "You want to see him?" he asked quietly. Imani exhaled, long, controlled. "Yes," she said, surprising even herself, "because whatever he's about to bring, it ends today." Damien nodded solemnly. "I'll be right here," he said, and he meant it. Imani stepped outside, the wind brushing across her face. Preston stood a few feet away, hands shoved into his coat pockets. His eyes looked exhausted, frantic, and searching. Imani, he began quickly, stepping forward. Please, just let me explain. She held up a hand, stopping him. No, you had years to explain. Talk. He swallowed hard. I didn't sleep with Claire, he blurted out. Imani blinked. Her chest tightened. He continued desperately. My mother pushed that narrative. She manipulated things. Stop, Imani said sharply. Do you expect that to fix anything? No, he admitted. But I need you to know I didn't cheat. Imani stared at him, searching his face. She didn't see the man she married. She saw weakness, fear, confusion, dependence on his mother's approval. She saw the truth she'd refused to acknowledge. He was never strong enough to stand beside her. Whether he cheated or not no longer mattered. You still betrayed me, Imani said softly. You betrayed my trust, my heart, my worth. Preston's voice cracked. I didn't mean to. You let your family disrespect me, she continued. You let them talk about me like I was temporary. You let them convince you that I wasn't enough. His eyes filled with moisture. I was wrong. Yes, she said. You were. A long silence stretched between them. Imani, please, Preston whispered. Can we talk? We just did, she replied. He looked like he might collapse, but she didn't reach out. She didn't comfort him. She didn't soften. She simply breathed, steady, firm, rooted in her truth. This chapter is over, she said. You need to accept that. He closed his eyes in defeat. Another gust of cold wind swept through the driveway. When he looked up again, Damien stood behind Imani, silent but solid, a presence that made Preston's shoulders tense. Preston swallowed hard. I see, he said. You've moved on. Imani didn't answer. She didn't owe him clarity about her healing. Preston stepped back slowly. I'll go, he whispered. Goodbye, Preston, she said quietly. He stared at her for another second, devastated, then turned and walked away. The gate closed behind him. Imani inhaled sharply. Her shoulders dropped. Her spirits steadied. Damien stepped beside her, not touching her, not speaking, just being present. You okay? He asked gently. Imani nodded slowly. Yes, she said. And for the first time since the marriage collapsed, it felt true. The next morning, Imani woke to a vibration so persistent it sounded like her phone was buzzing in distress. She blinked into the soft morning light, disoriented for a second before reaching toward her nightstand. Her phone lay face down, trembling with non-stop notifications. She sighed. Part dread, part inevitability. Let's see what the world wants today, she whispered. She flipped it over. What she saw made her sit upright immediately. 34,880 unread notifications. Hundreds of missed calls. Thousands of social media mentions. News alerts from every major network. What? She breathed. She opened her notifications. A trending topic glared back at her. Hashtag stand with Imani. Imani stared, stunned. Another hashtag trended beneath it. Women deserve better. Before she could process, her phone rang. Nina. She answered instantly. Nina, what's happening? Nina sounded breathless, exhilarated. Girl, the internet loves you. Imani blinked. What? That article Elizabeth planted? The one dragging you? It backfired. People dug deeper. They found the county reports. They found out she neglected the estate. Someone leaked video clips of Elizabeth insulting you at charity events. Imani's breath hitched. Video clips? Oh yes, Nina said. And let's just say, the world is not treating her gently. Imani rubbed her temple. I didn't want a public fight. I know, Nina said. But you didn't start it. You didn't leak anything. You didn't post anything. People are supporting you because you handled everything with grace. Imani swallowed. Nina continued, women, especially black women, are posting videos saying they know exactly what it feels like to be dismissed by wealthy families, underestimated in marriages, or blamed for leaving unhealthy situations. Imani felt her throat tighten. Another notification buzzed. A viral TikTok with 4.3 million views. A young woman spoke directly into the camera. Imani Hale walked into a marriage where she was treated like a guest in her own life. Now she's building something for women who feel the same way. I don't care what the Whitmans say. I'm standing with her. Another notification. A journalist tweeted, "Imagine losing your husband, your home, and your identity, then choosing to rebuild not by tearing others down, but by lifting up the community." That's Imani Hale. Another. A video montage. Imani at a charity event. Imani speaking at a legal conference. Imani helping a young woman find a job. Imani smiling through years of pressure. Caption. She's always been the strong one. Now the world sees it. Her eyes watered. She hadn't expected this. She hadn't asked for this. But deep inside, it felt good to be seen. Not as Preston's wife. Not as an outsider in the Whitman empire. Not as a woman abandoned. But as herself. Strong. Whole. Determined. Nina continued, her voice growing more energized. Celebrities are reposting your story. Women's organizations, community leaders, even a couple of senators. Imani closed her eyes, overwhelmed. "I don't want fame," she whispered. "Imani," Nina said softly, "you're not famous because of drama. You're respected because of resilience." A tear slipped down her cheek. A soft knock sounded at her door. "I'll call you back," Imani said, wiping her eyes. She opened the door. It was Tasha, holding a bag of pastries and wearing an oversized hoodie. "I brought breakfast," Tasha announced. "Because you're trending, worldwide, and you're gonna need carbs." Imani let out a shocked laugh and stepped aside. "Come in before the internet finds me," she said. Tasha set the pastries on the table and immediately opened her phone. "Girl," she said dramatically, "someone made an edit calling you the real-life Phoenix. Another person wrote a poem about you. A pastor posted a sermon clip saying you're proof that God restores." Imani took a deep breath. "This is a lot, but good," Tasha insisted. "Finally, someone in our family becomes famous for something positive and not for knocking someone out at a cookout." Imani laughed again, genuinely. But then another notification hit her phone. A statement from Preston. She froze. Her stomach tightened. She tapped the alert. A video opened. Preston stood in front of his condo, reporters surrounding him. He looked exhausted, unshaven, defeated. "Imani," he said into the cameras, voice cracking, "is not the villain in this situation. I made mistakes. My family made mistakes, and I didn't deserve her." A reporter shouted, "Did you cheat?" Preston shook his head vigorously. "No, I never cheated. My assistant wasn't pregnant." Imani froze. Her heart raced. "She wasn't pregnant," Preston continued. "My mother misunderstood, or misrepresented, a private medical conversation. I should have corrected it. I didn't, and I hurt my wife in a way that I will regret for the rest of my life." Imani felt the room tilt slightly. Preston forced a shaky breath. "I take responsibility, and I am asking everyone to stop attacking Imani. She deserves peace." The video ended. Tasha cringed. "Oof. He looks like he hasn't slept since the Civil War." Imani didn't respond. She sank slowly into her chair. A truth she expected. A truth she didn't need. A truth that didn't change anything, but still cut deep. She inhaled shakily. "I didn't need that." Tasha nodded. But the world needed to hear it. Another notification buzzed. A text from Damien. "Saw the news. Are you okay? I'm outside. Don't open the door if you don't want to." Imani blinked. "He's here?" she whispered. Tasha smirked. "Your man came to check on you." "He's not my man," Imani said automatically. Tasha raised one eyebrow. "Sure. And I'm the Queen of England." Imani stood, walked to the door, and opened it slowly. Damien stood on her porch in a gray coat, hands tucked into his pockets, concern lining his face. "You came all the way here?" Imani asked softly. He nodded. "You looked shaken in your text last night, and after the news this morning. I wanted to make sure you weren't facing it alone." Her chest tightened. He took a careful step forward. "Are you all right?" Imani exhaled. "I'm overwhelmed." Damien nodded once, his eyes gentle. "That's normal. You're carrying a lot." She swallowed. "The internet has turned me into something I'm not." "No," he corrected softly. "The internet finally sees what you've been all along." Her breath caught. He stepped inside when she moved aside. Tasha wiggled her eyebrows dramatically. Leave you two alone. Tasha, Imani warned gently, but her cousin grabbed 2 pastries and disappeared into the bedroom anyway. Damien looked around her living room. The blueprints rolled on the table, the soft throw blanket draped over the couch, the framed photo of her parents on the wall. This is a good space, he said quietly. Warm, honest, like you. Imani felt heat rise in her cheeks. He continued, I saw Preston's statement. She tensed. Damien, you don't have to explain anything, he said gently. His clarity doesn't erase his harm. Imani's breath trembled. Damien stepped closer. You didn't need him to admit it. You already knew your truth. Silence settled across the room. A gentle, steady silence. Imani whispered, Why are you being so kind to me? Damien answered without hesitation. Because you deserve it. Her throat tightened with emotion she'd held back for months. He lifted a hand, slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, then brushed his, fingers lightly against her cheek, wiping away a tear she didn't realize had fallen. I'm proud of you, he murmured. Imani closed her eyes. Let the truth settle into her bones. Let herself feel seen. When she opened her eyes again, Damien was still watching her gently. She whispered, Thank you. You don't have to thank me, he said. I'm just here, not pushing, not rushing, simply present. For the first time, she leaned toward him, not for a kiss, not for romance, for steadiness. He opened his arms slightly, waiting. She stepped into them. He held her gently, strong enough to support her, soft enough not to overwhelm her. She breathed into his chest. His chin rested lightly atop her head. In that quiet moment, she understood. This wasn't infatuation. This wasn't rebound. This wasn't distraction. This was connection, respect, a beginning she wasn't afraid of. When she pulled back slightly, he brushed her cheek again. We're going to face this together, he said. She nodded, once, firmly. Yes, she whispered. We are. The moment Imani pulled back from Damien's arms, she felt the echo of his warmth lingering gently along her skin. His presence had softened something inside her, something she had been bracing tightly ever since the Whitman betrayal. She stepped back, clearing her throat, trying to steady the sudden rush of emotion in her chest. Damien didn't push, didn't step forward, didn't crowd. He simply watched her with a calm, quiet concern that made the room feel smaller in the best way. Imani, he said softly, whatever you need right now. I'm here. She looked down at her hands, then back at him. I don't want to be alone tonight. His expression shifted, not with surprise or assumption, but with profound understanding. Okay, he said gently. Then I won't go anywhere. And he meant it. She could hear it in his tone. He wasn't staying because of pity. He wasn't staying because of obligation. He was staying because he cared, deeply. Quietly, steadily. Let's sit, he suggested. She nodded. They moved toward the living room couch, where a soft blanket was draped over the armrest. Damien took a seat first, leaning back with a relaxed posture, giving her plenty of space to join him without pressure. Imani sat close, not touching, but close enough to feel the warmth of his presence. For several seconds they didn't speak. The silence wasn't awkward. It was grounding, like a moment suspended gently in time. Finally, Damien broke it. How are you really feeling? He asked. Imani exhaled slowly, like the ground keeps shifting under me. He nodded. That makes sense. I don't know how to navigate people suddenly caring, she admitted. The internet is praising me. My ex-husband is apologizing publicly. Elizabeth is unraveling. And She paused. I just want to breathe. Damien leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees. You've been surviving in chaos for so long that peace feels unfamiliar. Imani's breath caught. Because he was right, she swallowed. I'm trying to build something good, something meaningful, but every time I take a step forward, the past pulls at me. And still, he said gently, you keep walking. Imani looked at him, really looked at him, at the steadiness in his eyes, at the quiet strength in his posture, at the warmth in his voice. Why are you being so kind to me? She whispered again. Damien held her gaze, unwavering. Because I know what it's like to rebuild, he said. I know what it's like to lose a life you thought you'd have. I know what it's like to wake up with a hole where your future used to be. She blinked slowly, surprised. He rarely talked about himself, never about anything deep. Damien, "What happened?" she asked gently. He hesitated, not with fear, but with the weight of remembering. "My dad," he finally said. "He passed 3 years ago. Suddenly, no warning." Imani's heart softened. "I'm so sorry." He nodded once. "We built my firm together. Everything I know, everything I am professionally, comes from him. Losing him, it felt like losing my foundation, my anchor." Imani leaned closer, listening intently. "For months," Damien said quietly, "I couldn't work, I couldn't focus. I felt like I was moving through water." He swallowed. "Then one day, I got a call from a single mother who needed help restoring her family home after a fire. I almost said no, but something in me said yes." "And that changed things?" Imani asked. He smiled softly. "It gave me purpose again. Helping someone else rebuild helped me rebuild too." Imani felt tears gather behind her eyes, not from sadness, but from resonance. Damien touched the back of her hand lightly. "That's what you're doing now. Magnolia House isn't just for women in need. It's for you too." Her breath wavered. The truth of it hit her harder than any headline. "Damien," she whispered. He didn't let go of her hand. "Imani," he said softly, "you don't have to pretend with me." She looked away, overwhelmed. He gently turned her hands so their palms met, a warm, grounding connection. "You're safe," he murmured. Her throat tightened. Words felt too heavy for the moment, so she leaned toward him. Just a little, just enough for her shoulder to brush his arm. Damien didn't move, didn't exhale sharply, didn't react with startled intensity. He simply shifted, barely, so she could rest more comfortably against him. His warmth seeped through her sweater. His steady breathing calmed hers, and his presence wrapped around her like a quiet shield. Minutes passed, maybe more. Imani didn't know, didn't care. Eventually, she whispered, "I'm scared." Damien's fingers brushed her forearm gently. "Of what?" he asked. "That if I let myself feel again." She paused, voice trembling. "I'll break." Damien turned slightly, careful not to startle her. "You won't break," he said. "Not with me." Imani closed her eyes. A tear slipped down her cheek. Damien caught it with the soft edge of his thumb. Not possessively, not intimately, tenderly. Then he asked the question no one had dared ask her. "What do you need tonight?" Imani inhaled sharply. But she knew the answer. Not romance, not passion, not distraction. She whispered, "I just need someone here." Damien's expression softened, warm as candlelight. "Then I'm here," he said, "all night." Her chest tightened with relief. "Are you sure?" she whispered. "Yes," he said without hesitation. "I want to be here." She nodded, wiping her eyes. He stood slowly. "Where do you want me? Couch? Guest room?" Imani hesitated. The loneliness she'd been swallowing for months rose to the surface. She whispered, barely audible, "Stay here." Damien's breath caught, not with anticipation, but with understanding. He nodded once. "Okay." They moved to the couch again, but this time, side by side, a blanket over them. Damien leaned back first, letting her choose the pace. Imani curled lightly against his side, resting her head on his shoulder. He wrapped an arm around her, loose, respectful, steady. The world outside quieted. Her breathing matched his. Her heart slowed. They talked for hours, softly, quietly. He told her about projects he loved. She told him about her childhood. He told her about the neighborhood he grew up in. She told him about the first time she argued a case. And somewhere between the stories, her body relaxed, her guard lowered, her eyes grew heavy. "Damien?" she murmured. "Yeah?" he whispered, voice warm and low. "Thank you." His arm tightened slightly, only slightly. "Anytime," he said. "I mean that." Minutes later, sleep pulled her under. Damien didn't move. He didn't sleep. He didn't shift. He didn't let go. He stayed awake just to make sure she rested peacefully. At one point, he glanced down at her, her cheek pressed to his shoulder, her hand resting lightly on his chest. His heart softened almost painfully. He whispered into her hair, so quietly she didn't stir, "You deserve everything good." For the first time in years, Imani slept safely, held not by a man who wanted to possess her, but by a man committed to protecting her peace. And Damien, sitting quietly on her couch while the night wrapped around them, made himself a silent promise. He wouldn't rush her. He wouldn't overwhelm her. He wouldn't cross lines. He would simply stay, for as long as she needed. Soft morning light seeped through the curtains of Imani's living room, brushing lightly over the couch. The blanket draped across two sleeping figures and the quiet calm that had taken root overnight. Imani stirred first. Still half asleep, she inhaled deeply and felt warm, safe, grounded. Her head was resting on a firm, steady surface. A heartbeat thumped softly beneath her cheek. A slow, deep breath rose and fell under her hand. Her mind fluttered awake. Reality rushed in. Damien. Her eyes opened slowly, adjusting to the sunlight. Sure enough, she was curled lightly against his chest, her hand resting near his heart, their legs loosely tangled under the blanket. Damien was still asleep, and the sight of him, relaxed, peaceful, gentle, pulled a softness from her chest she didn't expect. He looked different when he slept. Younger, unburdened, still handsome but less composed, more open. Imani's breath caught quietly. She hadn't slept beside a man in what felt like years, not really slept. Not deeply, not without fear of judgment or morning coldness. But last night she fell asleep without hesitation, and he stayed awake long after to make sure she felt safe. She shifted slightly. His arm tightened around her instinctively, not possessively, not out of habit, but protectively. He murmured something under his breath, voice low and muffled. His head tilted slightly toward her, his chin brushing her hair. Imani froze. Her heart fluttered painfully. She swallowed and whispered, "Damien." He stirred, eyelids fluttering open. It took him a second to register their position, then he blinked fully awake, lifting his head just a little. "Good morning," he said softly, voice still husky from sleep. Imani's cheeks warmed. "Good morning." For a moment, neither moved. Their bodies were too close. Their breaths brushed faintly. The night's intimacy lingered between them. Damien cleared his throat, loosening his arm but not pulling away completely. "Did you sleep okay?" he asked. Imani hesitated, because the truth was vulnerable. "Yes," she whispered. "Better than I have in a long time." Damien's expression softened with quiet relief. "I'm glad," he murmured. A beat of silence passed before he added, "You can always tell me if something doesn't feel right, if I cross a line, if you need space." Imani shook her head gently. "You didn't cross anything." He nodded slowly, absorbing her words, his eyes searching her face for confirmation. She offered a small smile. "You were exactly what I needed," she said softly. Something flickered in his eyes, warmth, gratitude, something deeper he didn't dare name yet. "Good," he whispered. They finally sat up, both adjusting their clothes and smoothing their hair. A quiet awkwardness settling between them, not uncomfortable, just new. A boundary had shifted last night, and neither of them knew exactly how to move now. Imani stood and walked toward the kitchen. "I'll make coffee," she said, mostly to fill the silence. "I'll help," Damien replied, rising slowly and stretching his shoulders. She glanced over her shoulder at him, tall, rumpled, warm-eyed, and her heart fluttered again. This was too early, too tender, too easy, too right. In the kitchen, she filled the coffee maker while Damien grabbed mugs from the cabinet as if he'd been there 1,000 times. "You know where everything is?" she asked playfully. He smiled slightly. "You told me where the mugs were the night you moved in. I remember." She paused, surprised by how much that simple memory touched her. "You really listen," she said quietly. He shrugged gently. "You deserve that." The way he said it, effortless, honest, made her chest feel warm. The coffee maker began to drip. They stood in the quiet kitchen for a moment, comfortable again. Until Imani's phone vibrated violently on the counter. She stiffened, dread rising like a tide. Damien glanced at it. "You don't have to check that." "I need to," she whispered. He nodded. She tapped the screen. Hundreds of new messages, but one notification stood out. A live interview request from a national morning show. Her breath caught. Damien stepped closer. "What is it?" "They want me on television," she said, voice shaking. "To talk about everything." Damien's expression hardened protectively. "You don't owe the world anything." "I know," she whispered. "But they'll tell the story without me whether I talk or not." He stepped directly in front of her, voice steady. "Imani, You get to choose your own narrative. You don't have to explain your pain to strangers. She swallowed, overwhelmed. His hand brushed hers lightly. You choose what you share, he murmured. Not them. Her throat tightened. Thank you. He held her gaze for a long moment. What do you need right now? He asked gently. I need to go to the estate, she said. Seeing the progress helps me breathe. Then I'll drive you, Damien replied. You've had enough chaos for one morning. She hesitated. You don't have to. I want to, he said, firm but warm. She stared at him, the quiet sincerity in his eyes, the promise of stability, and nodded. Okay, she murmured. They finished their coffee quietly, and within 10 minutes they were in his truck, the morning air brisk and refreshing. The ride was silent, but steady. Occasionally, Damien reached over and tapped her knee lightly, just checking in with a glance. Every time she nodded. Every time he returned his focus to the road. As they drove through the estate gates, Imani exhaled slowly. This place, it feels like a heartbeat, she said softly. Damien smiled. Then let's keep it beating. They walked through the foyer together. Workers greeted her with respect. A few nodded at Damien knowingly, sensing the shift in their energy. Near the back of the estate, Marisol waved Imani over. Miss Hale, have you seen the news? You're everywhere. Imani forced a small smile. So I've heard. Well, we're with you, Marisol said firmly. Out here? You're building something real. Imani swallowed emotion and nodded. Thank you. As they walked upstairs, Damien asked gently, Want to check the counseling wing first? Yes, she whispered. He led the way up the stairs, each step grounding her again. They entered the newly gutted room, sunlight pouring in through wide windows, the space beginning to take shape. Imani stopped in the center of the room, and without warning, her eyes filled with tears. Damien stepped closer. Imani? She shook her head, wiping quickly. I'm okay, it's just this room. This is where women will come to feel safe, to heal, to take their first step. Her voice caught. I never had a place like this when my world collapsed. I kept everything inside. I hid everything. I fought alone. Damien touched her elbow gently. You're not alone anymore, he whispered. Her breath hitched. She looked up at him, really looked, and in his eyes she saw something she hadn't seen in years. Support, stability, care. His hand brushed her cheek, slow and careful. She didn't pull back. Damien, she breathed. He stepped closer. Yes? I don't know where this is going, she whispered, and I'm scared to let anything grow while I'm still healing. I know, he murmured, and I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give. Her voice trembled. But I feel something. He exhaled slowly, relief passing through him. I do too, he whispered. Their foreheads touched gently, not a kiss, not a declaration, but a promise. Soft, steady, honest. I'm here, Damien murmured. In whatever way you need. Imani closed her eyes. Let the warmth seep through her. Let the fear loosen. Let the world quiet for just a moment. When she opened her eyes again, she whispered, Stay close. Damien's jaw softened. Always. By afternoon, the estate hummed with the familiar rhythm of renovation. Drills buzzing, workers, shuffling equipment, Damien and his team studying blueprints spread across long wooden tables. But while the house buzzed with steady progress, the world outside was on fire. Imani felt it every time her phone vibrated in her pocket. She tried ignoring it, focusing on the placement of walls and the restructured layout for the counseling rooms. But the notifications wouldn't stop. They piled up like waves, relentless, rising, crashing into her peace. Damien noticed. He always did. You've checked that phone 3 times in the last 10 minutes, he said quietly as she measured the width of a hallway. Something's wrong. Imani lowered the tape measure with a sigh, leaning lightly against the wall. It's not just one thing, she murmured. It's everything. Damien stepped closer, leaving enough space not to overwhelm her, but close enough to steady her. Tell me, he said. Imani exhaled heavily and finally pulled out her phone. Here, she said, handing it to him. Damien glanced down. His jaw clenched immediately. Imani Hale becomes symbol of strength for women nationwide. Former Mrs. Whitman turning estate into women's haven. Elizabeth Whitman, under scrutiny for neglect allegations. Anonymous sources claim Whitmans feared Imani's intelligence. Most were supportive. Some were cruel. Some were outright vicious. Damien scrolled slowly, expression darkening. One comment read, "She's doing too much. Why take their family home? Revenge project." Another, "Good for her. Black women don't get enough credit for walking away with dignity." Another, harsher, "She's ruining that family. She must be stopped." Damien stopped reading. His hand tightened around the phone. Imani watched him, eyes tired. "Now you see why I'm overwhelmed." He looked up at her slowly, eyes gentle, protective, steady. "You shouldn't have to carry this alone," he said. She swallowed. "I know. But this is what happens when your life becomes a public conversation." He took a slow step closer. "You're not a conversation. You're a woman trying to build something good." Her chest tightened with gratitude she couldn't speak. They gathered with the workers in the main hall for the daily check-in. While Damien discussed structural reinforcements and timelines, Imani tried to focus. She took notes, asked questions, tried to stay present. But the murmurs around the estate grew louder by the hour. Workers whispered kindly, "Miss Hale, you're trending again. Lady, we got your back. People out there are rooting for you." But a contractor's assistant whispered too loudly to a coworker, "She better be careful. Families like the Whitmans don't lose quietly." Imani pretended not to hear. Damien didn't pretend. His entire body stiffened, and for a second his jaw ticked, but he stayed silent for her sake. When the meeting ended, he walked directly to her. "Take a break," he said softly. "You're pushing yourself too hard." Imani shook her head. "I'm fine." He raised one eyebrow, a very clear "No, you're not." She sighed. "Okay, maybe a short break." They stepped outside onto the back terrace, overlooking acres of land. The sky stretched wide with drifting clouds, the winter air light against her skin. "Breathe," Damien murmured. She did. Deep in. Slow out. Again and again, the tightness in her chest eased. "You shouldn't have to be this strong alone," he said quietly. She looked at him with soft, weary eyes. "But I am alone." "No," he said. "You're not." The certainty in his voice made her throat tighten. Before she could respond, the sound of footsteps echoed behind them. It was Vera. She waved a folder in the air. "We have a problem." Imani and Damien straightened instantly. "What now?" Imani asked. "It's the Whitmans," Vera said, walking onto the terrace. "They've hired a PR team." Imani blinked. "For what?" Vera opened the folder. "They're launching a public smear campaign. Press interviews, leaked documents, allegations that you manipulated county officials. They're trying to destroy your credibility." Imani's heart dropped. Damien stepped protectively closer to her. "What does that mean?" She whispered. "It means," Vera said, "they're desperate." Damien's jaw flexed. "How bad is it?" Vera took out a statement. Imani Hale took advantage of a grieving family, used legal loopholes to seize a generational home, and is weaponizing public sympathy for personal gain. Imani closed her eyes briefly. "Of course, Elizabeth never lost quietly." Vera continued. "They're even framing Preston as emotionally fragile, hinting you left him for another man." Imani's eyes flew open. "What?" Vera nodded grimly. "There's a photo circulating online of you and Damien standing near the truck yesterday." Imani's heartbeat stumbled. Damien's jaw hardened. "That's ridiculous." "It doesn't matter," Vera said. "A narrative like this can spiral." Damien placed a calm hand on Imani's arm. "Don't panic." "I'm not panicking," she whispered. "I'm just tired." Vera softened. "I know, honey. But this is only their first move. They're trying to intimidate you." Imani steadied herself with a slow exhale. "Then, I won't back down." Damien nodded. "Good," Vera added. "We'll handle it strategically. You don't need to respond yet." Imani nodded faintly. "Thank you." Vera stepped away to take a call, leaving Imani and Damien alone again. Imani turned to him. "This is getting out of hand." Damien reached for her hands, gently, not assuming, just offering support. "Imani," he said softly, "the world can shout as loud as it wants. Your truth doesn't change." She looked down, overwhelmed. His thumb brushed the back of her hand. "You're not doing anything wrong," he continued. You're building something good, something beautiful. Let them scream, let them twist facts, you stay focused. Her voice shook. It's hard, and I'm here, he said. Every step, every day, I'm here. Imani inhaled shakily and nodded, but before the moment could soften, another voice called from behind. Miss Hale. She turned. It was a young woman, barely 20, holding her phone with trembling hands. Imani frowned. Yes. I'm sorry, the woman said breathlessly. I volunteer at a women's shelter. I just saw everything online, and I wanted to tell you, you're helping more people than you realize. Imani blinked. You're giving people like me hope, the woman whispered, eyes watering. Thank you. Imani's heart cracked open. She stepped toward the young woman and pulled her into a gentle hug. Damien watched with quiet pride. After the woman left, Imani's eyes shined with emotion. She whispered, I needed that. Damien touched her shoulder gently. And you'll keep hearing it. Another notification buzzed on her phone. Another viral post. Magnolia House is going to change lives. Imani breathed slowly. The world was loud. The Whitmans were furious. Preston was unraveling. But she was rising. She turned to Damien, voice soft but certain. I'm not giving up, she said. He smiled, slow, warm, deeply proud. Good, he murmured. Neither am I. Imani exhaled, feeling the storm circling. But with Damien beside her, steady, strong, unwavering, she finally knew. She wasn't facing it alone. For the first time in days, the estate felt cold. Not the crisp winter chill outside, no. This cold came from the shift in the air, the tension rippling through each worker, the hushed voices circling the property like a subtle warning. Imani sensed it the moment she stepped through the main doors. Damien sensed it too. He walked toward her instantly, adjusting the collar of his jacket, his expression dark with concern. We need to talk, he said quietly. Imani's stomach tightened. What happened? Inside, away from everyone. That tone, low, guarded, made her pulse skip. She followed him into the old parlor, where the family portraits once hung. Now, the walls were bare, clean, neutral, but the energy was anything but peaceful. Damien closed the door behind them. Then he turned. His voice was gentle, but firm. Imani, a major women's advocacy group released a statement about you. Her heart dropped. Which group? She asked, bracing herself. One you admired, he said softly. One you donated to. Imani's breath thinned. She whispered, What did they say? Damien hesitated, not because he wasn't sure, but because he hated being the one to say it. Finally, they're accusing you of turning your personal pain into a publicity stunt. Imani blinked slowly, as if her brain couldn't immediately process the words. A publicity stunt? She repeated, voice almost flat. Damien nodded grimly. They say you're overshadowing real survivors, pulling attention away from women with no resources, using your divorce as a way to gain fame. Imani swallowed. Once, twice. Her throat tightened, painfully. But that's not true, she whispered. I didn't ask for attention. I didn't ask for anything. I know, Damien said quietly. They know my work, she continued, voice rising. They know I've volunteered, donated, spoken at their events. I know, Damien repeated. Imani shook her head slowly. Why would they turn on me? Damien exhaled. Because the Whitmans' PR team is fueling the narrative. Imani stared at him, stunned. Elizabeth is positioning herself as a victim of your attack, he explained. They're framing you as privileged, as someone using wealth and status to play hero. Imani laughed, but not with humor. It was disbelief, betrayal, hurt, wealth. She said, I didn't inherit anything. I worked for everything I have. Damien stepped closer. Imani, you are one of the strongest women I've ever met, but even the strongest women bleed. Her breath wavered. He gently took her hands. Let yourself feel this. Don't pretend it doesn't hurt. Her eyes burned suddenly, hot, sharp. It does hurt, she whispered. A lot. He nodded. She lifted her gaze to him. What else did the statement say? Damien hesitated again. Tell me, she insisted. He squeezed her hands gently before letting go and pulling his phone out. He tapped a link, then handed it to her. Imani read. Her stomach twisted. Imani Hale is projecting her pain onto a community that needs structure, not emotion. Her motives appear more self-serving than service-oriented. Turning a historic estate into a so-called healing center seems more like a vanity project. Her breath hitched sharply. A line near the bottom froze her cold. Women don't need Imani's story. They need leadership. Imani lowered the phone slowly. Her chest felt like it was caving in. For a second, neither of them spoke. Then Imani whispered, "Leadership," she blinked away tears, "is exactly what I'm trying to give." Damien reached out and cupped the side of her arm gently. "You are," he said, "but people attack what they don't understand." She stepped away from him, just slightly, pressing her back against the windowsill. "I thought they would support me," she whispered. "I thought they'd be proud of what I'm building." "Some are," Damien said quickly, "but the loudest voices are the ones influenced by the Whitmans." Imani's head dropped. "I'm exhausted." Damien stepped close again, not touching her, but anchoring her with his presence. "You're fighting a family that cares more about image than truth," he said, "and the world is watching your every move." Imani rubbed her forehead, overwhelmed. "Maybe I shouldn't have bought this estate. Maybe this was a mistake." Damien's voice sharpened, low, firm, protective. "Don't say that." She looked up. "You keep thinking this fight is about you," he said. "It's not. It's about the women who will walk through these doors one day." Imani's eyes watered again. Damien continued, "You're building a space where they can heal, a space where their pasts don't define them, a space where they are seen." Imani shook her head, tears rising. "But right now, everyone is tearing me apart." "Not everyone," he said. "Look around this place. Your workers respect you. The volunteers support you. Women across the country are defending you." She swallowed hard. "And I'm here," Damien added softly, "no matter how loud the world gets." She closed her eyes, just for a moment, letting his words settle. Then, her phone buzzed again. A message from Nina. "Call me a sap, things are escalating." Imani wiped her eyes. "I need to call her." Damien nodded. "I'll give you space." He stepped toward the door. Imani grabbed his wrist gently. "Stay." Damien froze, then nodded slowly. He remained near, leaning on the opposite side of the room, close enough to support her, far enough to give her emotional room. Imani tapped Nina's name. "Nina," she said, voice hushed. Nina launched straight in. "We have a problem, a big problem." Imani straightened. "What happened now?" "3 organizations rescinded partnerships," Nina said. "They're scared of association, and a political commentator is accusing you of being an opportunist." Imani pressed her fingers to her forehead. "This is spiraling." Nina lowered her voice. "It gets worse." Imani's pulse throbbed. "Elizabeth is holding a press conference at 5, Nina said. "She's going to try to bury you." Imani swallowed, throat tight. "I expected that." "No," Nina said. "This is coordinated, professionally orchestrated." She hired someone major. Damien stepped closer instinctively, hearing Nina's tone even from across the room. "Imani," Nina said, "they're trying to destroy your credibility." Imani's hand trembled. "What do I do?" Nina paused, then said something that cut through the panic like a blade. "You stand tall, you stay quiet, you let their lies collapse on their own weight." Imani's breath steadied slightly. "We'll fight this," Nina said, "legally, strategically. But don't say a word publicly yet." Imani nodded. "Okay. And Imani," Nina added softly, "you're stronger than all of them." The call ended. Imani lowered the phone and stood frozen for a moment, processing. Damien walked toward her, slow, steady, until he stood inches away. "Talk to me," he said. She met his eyes, and something inside her cracked open. "I feel like everything I do is being twisted," she whispered. "I feel like every step forward becomes another reason for someone to attack me." Damien lifted a hand, not to kiss her, not to pull her in, but to cradle the back of her head gently. "Imani," he said softly, "you're in the storm. And the storm is loud." Her breath stuttered. "But storms pass," he whispered. "And you're not alone in this one." She closed her eyes. A tear slipped down her cheek. Damien wiped it gently, then rested his forehead lightly against hers. Not a kiss, not a romantic push, just connection, just support, just truth. "You're one of the strongest women I've ever seen," he breathed. "And I'm going to stand right beside you until the world catches up." Her hands trembled, then rested lightly against his chest. "I'm scared," she whispered. "I know," he murmured. "I've got you." And in that moment, in the quiet parlor of a house once filled with judgment, Imani let herself breathe against someone who held her without fear, without pressure, without expectation, without condition. And for the first time since the world turned her story into a spectacle, she didn't feel alone. The estate was quieter than usual. The workers were still present, carrying materials, reviewing plans, moving equipment, but the sound felt muted. Conversations were shorter. Glances were longer. Everyone sensed something heavy in the air. Imani felt it too. She stood inside the partially renovated counseling wing, reviewing layout notes, but her mind wasn't fully present. Every few minutes, she checked the time on her phone. 4:37 p.m. 23 minutes until Elizabeth's press conference. Her stomach tightened. Damien entered the room with 2 bottles of water in hand. He handed her one quietly. "Hydrate," he said. "Whether we want it or not, tonight will change something." Imani managed a soft exhale. "I hate that she still holds this kind of power." He stepped beside her. "She doesn't. Not really. She just knows how to make noise." Imani leaned against the wall, closing her eyes. Noise can ruin lives. Damien turned fully toward her. "You're not alone," he reminded her. "No matter what she says tonight, I'm not going anywhere." His voice, steady and grounded, eased the tightness in her chest. Before she could respond, her phone buzzed with a text from Nina. "Turn on the news. She's starting early." Imani's stomach dropped. Damien nodded once. "Let's go." They walked together to the temporary staff room where a small TV sat mounted on the wall. Tasha was already there, pacing anxiously with a cup of tea. Finally, Tasha said, relieved, "I've been refreshing this channel every 2 seconds." Imani sat down slowly. Damien remained standing behind her, hands braced gently on the back of her chair, quietly protective. The news station cut to a live shot. Elizabeth Whitman stood behind a podium at the entrance of a high-end hotel in Buckhead, flanked by expensive lawyers and polished PR consultants. Photographers shouted her name. Cameras flashed. Microphones angled toward her. She looked composed, regal, dramatic in a tailored black coat. Imani felt her heartbeat tighten. "Good evening," Elizabeth began. "Thank you for coming." The confidence in her voice felt like ice. "I am here today," she continued, "to address the painful situation my family has endured at the hands of my former daughter-in-law." Imani's mouth parted in disbelief. Damien's jaw locked instantly. Tasha nearly dropped her cup. "Oh no, she didn't." Elizabeth pressed a hand to her chest theatrically. "For years, we embraced Imani as one of our own," she said. "We supported her, uplifted her, welcomed her into our home." Damien snorted. She barely looked at Imani, unless she wanted to criticize her. Imani swallowed hard, but said nothing. Elizabeth continued, "But the truth is, Imani did not value our family. She took advantage of us." Imani's breath hitched. Damien whispered sharply, "She's lying." But the microphones amplified Elizabeth's voice louder. "She manipulated legal loopholes," Elizabeth said, "and used emotional distress claims to seize our family estate." Imani whispered, "That's not true." Elizabeth held up a folder. "This," she announced dramatically, "contains evidence that the transaction was influenced by coercion and personal vendetta." Imani's heart pounded. Tasha gasped. "Vendetta?" Elizabeth continued ruthlessly. "She has turned our private pain into a platform. She has turned our beloved home into a spectacle. And she has turned my son's suffering into a media circus." Imani shook her head in disbelief. "I didn't do any of this." Damien tightened his grip on her chair. But Elizabeth wasn't finished. "Furthermore," she said, lowering her voice dramatically, "I fear for my son's well-being." Imani froze. Elizabeth wiped away a theatrical tear. "Preston was blindsided," she said, "emotionally devastated. He has been exploited." Imani felt her throat close. Tasha muttered, "She rehearsed this mess?" Before any reporter could ask a question, Elizabeth motioned to someone standing just behind her. "Preston," she said gently, "would you like to speak?" Imani's eyes widened. "No," she whispered. But there he was. Preston stepped forward, hair disheveled, suit wrinkled, eyes red and tired. He looked fragile, overwhelmed, and deeply confused. The crowd leaned in. "Preston," a reporter shouted, "do you feel exploited by your ex-wife?" Imani's heart slammed painfully. Preston hesitated, glancing around nervously. He looked like a man trapped between two worlds, one controlled by his mother and one he no longer understood. He started, voice shaky. "I made mistakes." Elizabeth placed a hand on his arm reassuringly, clearly guiding the narrative. "But," Preston continued, "I didn't expect her to take our home." Imani closed her eyes. Damien whispered, "He's folding. He's choosing his mother." Preston swallowed. "I'm hurting, and I wish things were different." Elizabeth squeezed his arm, stepping back to the podium triumphantly. "This is why," she said firmly, "we intend to challenge the deed transfer and pursue legal remedies." Imani stiffened. "They're trying to sue?" she whispered, horrified. Damien immediately knelt beside her chair. "They won't win. They have no legal grounds. Vera prepared everything perfectly." Imani shook her head slowly. "But they can create chaos. They can drag this on for months. They can destroy Magnolia House." Damien cupped her elbow gently. "No, they can't. I won't let them." On the TV, reporters shouted, "Mrs. Whitman, do you believe Imani targeted your family? Are you accusing her of using the estate for self-promotion? Will Preston seek damages? Do you blame her for your son's emotional stress?" Elizabeth answered each with dramatic nods, carefully crafted phrases. "An emotional manipulation so sharp it could cut through steel." Imani's chest tightened painfully. Suddenly, one reporter's voice cut through the crowd. "Mrs. Whitman, what about the county violations filed under your name?" Elizabeth froze briefly, just for a second. But she recovered quickly. "Those issues," she said coolly, "were exaggerated by Ms. Hale's legal team." Imani shook her head, tears gathering. Damien reached for her hand, warm, steady. "You're stronger than she expects," he breathed. Then, the reporter asked the question that shattered Imani's breath completely. "Mrs. Whitman, do you believe Imani is trying to replace you as the matriarch of your family legacy?" Elizabeth smiled, a cold, triumphant smile. "I believe," she said slowly, "that she has always wanted that." Damien cursed under his breath. Imani exhaled shakily. She knows exactly what she's doing. The press conference ended with Elizabeth hugging Preston dramatically as cameras flashed. Their PR team ushered them off stage like celebrities in a scripted show. As the network returned to the studio, the reporter concluded, "Imani Hale has yet to release a response." Silence swallowed the room. Imani stared blankly at the screen, her heartbeat loud in her ears. Tasha knelt beside her. "Bestie, I'm so sorry." Imani felt numb. Damien gently squeezed her shoulder. Then he asked, "What do you need right now?" Her eyes filled, tears spilling down her cheeks. She whispered, "I need to not fall apart." Damien immediately pulled her gently into his arms, not tightly, not demandingly, just enough to keep her from collapsing. "You won't," he whispered against her hair. "You hear me? You won't." She clutched his jacket, her breath trembling. "I can't do this alone," she cried quietly. "You're not alone," he murmured. "I'm right here." Her tears soaked into his chest, but he didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't let go. Outside the room, workers pretended not to hear the muffled sounds of pain. Some whispered prayers. Some clenched their fists in anger. Inside the room, Damien stroked her back gently, grounding her. When her crying slowed, he placed 2 fingers under her chin and lifted her face toward his. His voice was low, steady, certain. "Listen to me. This is not the end of your story. This is their last attempt to break you. And they failed." Imani swallowed, blinking back the last of her tears. He continued, "You're going to rise from this. Not because you're perfect, not because you're strong all the time, but because you don't quit." Imani inhaled shakily, meeting his eyes. "And I'm not leaving," Damien said. Her heart fluttered, broken but beating, shaken but not shattered. She whispered, "Thank you." He nodded, "Always." And right there, in the quiet of the half-renovated estate, Imani realized this wasn't the moment she broke. This was the moment she awakened. It was supposed to be the perfect Christmas morning. The lights twinkled. The champagne glasses rested in the ice bucket. and beneath the polished facade of the Whitman estate, a secret waited to explode. I'm your narrator. Call me your bestie's voice in your ear, and I'm about to take you back into the moment she couldn't escape, when she overheard those chilling words. But this is just the beginning. She thought she knew him. She thought she was safe. She thought their story was on solid ground. Then she heard, "My assistant is expecting my child," and everything changed. In those seconds, the polished world she believed in cracked open. The staircase where she stood, the banister she gripped, the echo of that voice, it all turned into an internal battlefield. Questions raced. Why hadn't he told her? Who is she? Was she ever enough? The world tilted. Downstairs, his mother applauded the news, praised the assistant-to-wife trajectory. And in the glow of the Christmas tree, Imani realized she wasn't just excluded, she was obsolete. She didn't run hysterically. She didn't collapse in tears in front of them. She left. Quietly, determined, she drove toward Atlanta. The road stretched ahead, cold winter air, frost-tipped trees, silent miles of self-reclamation. Every turn of the wheel was a vow. I will not be invisible. I will not shrink. Back in her law office, on Christmas Day no less, she opened the safe, retrieved the prenup, and read the clauses like a warrior reading her battle plan. Infidelity, immediate repayment, legal separation, not because she anticipated that exact betrayal, but because she refused to be powerless again. And in that moment she chose herself, the heat of betrayal that never cools. Stay with me, bestie. Part 2 will bring you everything Part 1 hinted at, but faster, sharper, deeper. And yes, the house will be bought. Yes, the board will revolt. Yes, the love will rise. But above all, she will shine. The story is just getting started, and trust me, you'll want to be right here when she takes the next step. See you in Part 2.